Chapter 1. Chief, according to our information, there will be a batch of food being shipped out from Crimson Fire City soon. The Lone Wolf mercenary group is transporting this batch of goods. There are about 50 of them. Why don't we go and do it? We won't have to worry for the second half of the year. Chief, in my opinion, the silk cloth from Cold Moon City is not bad. The wind-chasing mercenary group is transporting this batch of goods. There are about 70 of them. If we can get it, we won't have to worry for the next 3 years. Zhang Meng, who was sitting on the chief's seat, could not help but twitch his mouth when he heard the two chiefs' suggestions. These two suggestions were made by the third chief, He Wenliang, and the fourth chief, by Tianxing. Looking at He Wenliang and by Tianxing's confident faces, Zhang Meng had the urge to rush up and pry open their heads to see what was inside. The 2 batches of goods they mentioned were indeed very profitable. If they could get it, Shanhan would not have to worry for the next 1 or 2 years. However, there were only about 100 people in the mountain stronghold. Excluding the elderly, women, and children, as well as the 5 chiefs, there were only about 17 to 18 people who could fight. What could these people do? The 2 batches of goods were brazenly shipped out. It was obvious that they were not afraid of being robbed. Although it was Zhang Meng's first time attending the mountain stronghold's meeting, he understood after hearing their suggestions. The third chief and fourth chief were 2 idiots. Looking at their physiques, it was definitely not a problem for them to charge and break through the enemy lines, but they had to come up with ideas. Haha! Who would listen? Who would be finished? Since the third chief and fourth chief were not reliable, Zhang Meng turned to look at the second chief, Chen Zhongxiong, and asked with a smile. "Second uncle, what do you think?" Hearing this, Chen Zhongxiong first touched the few strands of sparse beard under his beard before speaking. "Chief, the mountain stronghold is running out of food. It's not a good idea to drag this on. Why don't we split up and take action? Double attack." After hearing Chen Zhongxiong's words, Zhang Meng was so shocked that he almost jumped out of his chair. Looking at the 4 chiefs sitting in 2 rows in the hall, Zhang Meng finally understood why his father had passed the position of chief to him even though he was still alive. Zhang Meng was now considering whether he should pass on his position as the leader of the stronghold. If this continued, he might be angered to death. Zhang Meng asked weakly as he turned his head around with great effort and looked at 5th Bandit Chief Feng Yongfu, who had yet to speak in the hall. "Fifth uncle, tell me your opinion," Feng Yongfu said plainly. "I have no objections to everyone's suggestions." Hearing Feng Yongfu's words, Zhang Meng had already given up on his 4 fort masters. He decided that as soon as Feng Yongfu finished speaking, he would immediately announce the removal of all 4 fort masters from their positions, so as to avoid angering people here. Feng Yongfu looked around with a complicated look in his eyes. "In the end," he said dejectedly, "I only hope that before the brothers set off, they will plant the food. That way, even if they don't come back, their families will have something to look forward to." After Feng Yongfu finished speaking, the hall, which had been boiling with excitement, suddenly quieted down. After a while, 2nd Bandit Chief Chen Zhongxiong said in a depressed tone, "Fifth brother, don't worry. Before the brothers set off, they will definitely plant the food. Even if we fail this time, we won't starve to death this year." Feng Yongfu nodded when he heard that. 3rd Bandit Chief He Wenliang suddenly shouted, "You guys don't have to go on this operation. I'll lead the team alone." The moment He Wenliang finished speaking, 4th Bandit Chief Bai Tianxing stood up abruptly and shouted even louder, "Don't go on this operation. I'll lead the team. I'm familiar with the situation there. It's best if I go." When 2nd Bandit Chief Chen Zhongxiong heard that, he was so angry that he slammed the table, causing the teacups on the table to fall to the ground. "Don't make a ruckus over there. I'm the 2nd Bandit Chief. Don't go on this operation. I'll lead the team. If anyone dares to argue, be careful of the Bandit Chief's punishment." When he heard them arguing non-stop, Zhang Meng was a little confused. He did not understand what was going on. However, there was one thing that he understood. The bandit chiefs under him were not idiots. They also knew that there was a slim chance of survival if they went on this operation. But why should they go? Zhang Meng had only transmigrated to this place for a short 3 days. He still did not understand the situation here. In order to understand the situation, Zhang Meng asked second bandit chief Chen Zhongxiong while they were not talking. Second uncle, since it's so dangerous to rob these 2 batches of goods, why should we go? Why don't we not go? When Chen Zhongxiong heard that, he raised his eyebrows. He was about to fly into a rage, but when he remembered that the person in front of him was the head bandit chief, even though he was his junior, he still had to give him some face. Head bandit chief, we've run out of food in the village. If we don't get some food, I'm afraid. When he said that, Chen Zhongxiong did not continue, but Zhang Meng already understood the meaning behind his words. The village had run out of food. If they did not go and get some, they would all starve to death. Zhang Meng thought about it and decided to think about it before making a decision. It was better to not do something like throwing an egg at a rock if he could avoid it. Chapter 2. When they found that there was a shortage of water, they realized that this was not a good place. However, it was too late to say anything. Fortunately, there was plenty of rain in the past few years. Everyone worked hard and had enough to eat. However, God might want to temper their willpower, so he reduced the rainfall. Therefore, the shortage of water became a big problem. People were like this. They were unwilling to move once they had a home. Even if there was a drought, they thought that it would be better next year if they held on a little longer. With this idea, and with the good harvest in the first 2 years, they saved some surplus food and held on for another year. As a result, the surplus food was eaten up, but God's test was not over yet. They were about to starve to death, but there was no surplus food in the village. In desperation, the 4 leaders decided to go out and do something. However, they could not do anything locally. Even if they wanted to do something, they had to go to the Magic Empire. Now, the Magic Empire and the Great Wu Empire were often at war. Even if they did something, they would not feel guilty. Fortunately, the place where they lived was not far from the border. Therefore, they sent the strong men in the village to the Magic Empire to inquire about the news. After half a month, with the continuous efforts of the young men, they finally got the news and hurriedly sent the news back to the village. Zhang Meng figured all this out. He suddenly realized that the 4 leaders under him were not idiots as he thought, but real hot-blooded men. In order to survive in the village, they did not hesitate to risk their lives. They were ready to lead a dozen young men who had not been trained to fight against 50 or 60 soldiers of the mercenary group. No, even if their courage was commendable, Zhang Meng would never allow them to do something that would lead to their deaths. Since he was the leader of the village, he had the obligation to keep the people in the village alive. As soon as Zhang Meng followed Chen Tao into the gate of the Chen family, he saw the second leader, Chen Zhongxiong, sitting on the steps in front of the gate in a daze. Zhang Meng hurried forward and greeted, "Second uncle." Chen Zhongxiong came back to himself. "Mengzi, come in. The rabbit meat will be ready soon." As soon as Zhang Meng entered the house, Chen Tao's mother placed a pot of steaming rabbit meat on the table. Chen Zhongxiong looked at the rabbit meat on the table and turned his head to instruct Chen Tao. "Go and get the jar of wine I buried under the tree." "Father, didn't you say that you would wait for me to get married before drinking that jar of wine?" When Chen Zhongxiong heard this, a trace of sadness flashed across his eyes. Then, he shouted angrily, "What are you talking about? I told you to bring it over, so just do it. Don't talk nonsense." Chen Tao shrank his neck after being lectured by his father. He hurriedly turned around and walked out of the door. Chen Zhongxiong asked Zhang Meng to sit at the table and asked his wife to fetch a few wine bowls. With the steaming hot rabbit meat and the treasured wine, Chen Zhongxiong was soon 70 to 80% drunk. Chen Zhongxiong picked up the wine bowl in front of him and said to Zhang Meng, "This time, third brother and fourth brother must go. I can't stop them." When Chen Zhongxiong said this, he sighed and said sadly, "If the three of us don't come back this time, the matters in the village will depend on you and fifth brother." When Zhang Meng heard this, he picked up the wine bowl in front of him and said with a smile, "Second uncle, don't be in a hurry to go. Give me 10 days. When the time comes, if the people in the village are still hungry, it won't be too late for you to go then." Chen Zhongxiong was stunned when he heard this. Then, he waved his hand and said with a bitter smile, "Mengzi, I understand what you mean. This time, we might not necessarily be in trouble. Who knows, we might be able to come back successfully." Zhang Meng shook his head and said in a firm tone, "Second uncle, trust me. Give me 10 days. After having dinner at Chen Zhongxiong's house, Zhang Meng took his leave. After leaving the Chen family's house, Zhang Meng did not go home. Instead, he walked out of the village. As soon as he walked out of the village, Zhang Meng looked around. When he saw that there was no one around, he exerted a little force on his feet. He turned into a flash of lightning and rushed to the mountain in front of him. The mountain was very high. If an ordinary person went up the mountain, it would take at least 2 to 4 hours to climb to the top. Even an expert would need an hour. However, in the blink of an eye, Zhang Meng had already reached the top of the mountain. This was the benefit of time travel. Zhang Meng had been in this world for 3 days. He spent most of his time familiarizing himself with his strength. When Zhang Meng first arrived in this world, he was shocked by his own strength. He could say without exaggeration that if he stood at the foot of the mountain and punched, if he used enough strength, he could definitely punch a tunnel through the mountain. If he was angry, it would be a piece of cake for him to raise the mountain to the ground with one punch. Not only was his strength amazing, but his defense was also invincible. Zhang Meng had tried using any weapons in the village, but they could not pierce his skin. Zhang Meng remembered very clearly that before he transmigrated, he was just an ordinary company employee. That day, when he was taking a walk in the park, he was struck by a bolt of lightning. He could not remember what happened next. When he opened his eyes, he became the chief of the village, Zhang Meng. Zhang Meng had no idea how he had obtained such a powerful strength. The moment he opened his eyes, he had obtained this strength. Standing on the mountain top and looking at the stars in the sky, Zhang Meng even thought that if he jumped with all his strength, would he be able to jump to those stars? He had such terrifying strength. If he still let the people in the village starve, wouldn't that be the biggest joke? Although he was not the original Zhang Meng, he had taken over his body after all. He had to do something for the people in the village. Otherwise, he would be an ungrateful person. Also, he had to find the lost memory and find the reason why he obtained such terrifying strength. What if his strength could be used 100 times, 1,000 times? What if he ran out of uses and met a strong enemy? Or, there was a time limit, 10 years, 20 years, sigh. Zhang Meng felt bitter in his heart. In short, the unknown was the most terrifying. A person without a goal was no different from a salted fish. Zhang Meng did not want to be a salted fish. He wanted to be a person with dreams. Therefore, he set 2 goals for himself for the time being. First, he had to build the village well. Only by building the village well could he live up to his body. Second, he had to find the lost memory and find out the reason why he obtained such strength. If there was a time limit or number of uses, it would be really bad. He would not even know how he died. Chapter 3. The most important problem now was that the stronghold had neither money nor food. It was fine if they had no money. At worst, they could just spend less. But without food they would die. Zhang Meng told Chen Zhongxiong that they would only need 10 days to solve the stronghold's food and clothing problem. The main reason was because he did not want to see his 4 stronghold chiefs throw their lives away. Zhang Meng really did not have any good ideas. After tormenting himself on the mountain, Zhang Meng returned home. He lay on his hard bed and began to ponder. However, after pondering for half a night, he still could not come up with a solution. This did not mean that Zhang Meng was stupid. Rather, it meant that he was not familiar with this world at all. Before transmigrating, he was also an old bookworm. He also knew about the few killing moves of transmigrators: mosquito-repellent incense, soap, glass, wine, and a series of money-making plans. However, he was not familiar with this world. He also did not know if these things that he knew existed in this world. If they did not, then Zhang Meng's opportunity would come. If they did, then he would have to think of another way. In the end, Zhang Meng decided to go to the city first to familiarize himself with the situation here. He would also see if there were any quick ways to make money. Early the next morning, Zhang Meng found Chen Tao and asked about the location of Cyanwood City. He declined Chen Tao's kind offer to lead the way and embarked on his journey alone. After leaving the valley of Mount Shuangniu, Zhang Meng saw that there was no one around. He determined the direction and began to speed up. He wanted to reach Cyanwood City as soon as possible and start his money-making business. Cyanwood City was not far from the stronghold. It was about 50 to 60 li away. If Zhang Meng ran at full speed, it would only take him 2 to 3 seconds. However, he did not know the way. He could only walk and stop to identify the direction before continuing forward. However, after walking for nearly an hour, Zhang Meng still hadn't seen the shadow of Azurewood City. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. Needless to say, Azurewood City was only 50 to 60 li away from the stronghold. Even if it was 100 li away, they should have arrived by now. Zhang Meng had no choice but to climb up a mountain and the tallest tree on the top of the mountain. He looked around and regretfully found that he seemed to be lost. There were only undulating mountain ranges everywhere, and there was no sign of a town. What gave Zhang Meng the biggest headache was that he didn't even know the way back. Just as Zhang Meng was having a headache, he suddenly heard the sound of footsteps. At the same time, it was mixed with the voices of a few people. "Young master, let's go back. We've already crossed the border. If we continue, I'm afraid we'll encounter enemies." "Old Luo, what are you afraid of? Even if we encounter those enemies, there's nothing to be afraid of. With our martial arts, there's no problem. Don't worry." "Young master, old Luo, if you continue, I'm going to get angry." This young master's words were really effective. Sure enough, there was no sound of talking in the forest, only the sound of footsteps. Zhang Meng heard someone talking and was immediately overjoyed. He hurriedly jumped down from the tree and ran towards the sound of the footstep. However, because he was overjoyed, the strength of his feet was a little too strong. Zhang Meng directly threw himself into a big tree. With a kacha sound, the tree, which was half a meter thick, was directly broken by Zhang Meng. The sound of the tree falling was very loud. When the people opposite heard this sound, they were immediately shocked. They immediately stopped and looked in the direction of the falling tree. One of the big men, who was wearing leather armor, quickly walked to the front and blocked the two young masters. At the same time, he constantly looked around the situation. At this moment, Zhang Meng appeared in their line of sight. When the big man in leather armor saw Zhang Meng, he immediately pulled out the saber at his waist and sternly shouted, "Who's in front of us?" Zhang Meng hurriedly replied, "I'm from the Erneu mountain village. I'm lost and want to ask for directions." While speaking, Zhang Meng was also looking at the other party. The man who asked the question had a bow and a few arrows on his back, and a large saber in his hand. He was constantly sizing him up. Zhang Meng was only 18 years old this year. His appearance was not very strong, and at first glance, he was the kind of ordinary person who did not have any fighting strength. Seeing Zhang Meng's appearance, the big man in leather armor was relieved. However, when he thought of the sound of the falling tree, he hurriedly asked, "What was that sound just now?" Zhang Meng scratched his head and somewhat embarrassedly said, "Just now, I accidentally broke the tree." Hearing this, the big man in leather armor, who had just relaxed, became nervous again. When he was about to ask again, the young master behind him had quickly walked to his side. Seeing this, the big man in leather armor was about to open his mouth to stop him, but the young master waved his hand and stopped him. The young master looked at Zhang Meng and asked with a smile, "Are you from the Dao Kingdom?" Zhang Meng nodded. He knew this. "Just now, did you break the tree?" Zhang Meng nodded again. "How did you topple that tree?" Zhang Meng thought for a moment, turned sideways and made a posture of bumping into the tree, and explained, "I knocked it down." The young master smiled and nodded, and then asked, "So, you should be very strong, right?" Zhang Meng thought for a moment and nodded. There was nothing to be ashamed of if he was strong. "Do you want to earn some gold coins?" Hearing this, Zhang Meng immediately nodded. Didn't he come out this time just to get some food and gold coins? Seeing that Zhang Meng agreed, the young master's smile became wider. He clapped his hands and smiled. "What I want you to do is actually quite simple. Follow us to hunt, and after we catch the prey, you have to carry it for us. Don't you think this job is simple?" Zhang Meng also nodded. This job was indeed simple, but he still asked, "How much is the reward?" The young master thought for a moment and stretched out a finger. 10 gold coins? Hearing this, Zhang Meng turned around and left. This guy was too insincere. Just now, he had already looked around from the tree. If he wanted to walk out of this forest, he would have to walk a long way. This guy only offered 10 gold coins. He was too stingy. Seeing that Zhang Meng was about to leave, the young master hurriedly shouted again, 20 gold coins. Hearing this, Zhang Meng stopped, turned around, looked at the young master, and stretched out a finger. 1,000 gold coins. Since the young master was asking for a sky-high price, Zhang Meng decided to be ruthless. At worst, the young master would bargain again. Hearing Zhang Meng's asking price, the young master's mouth suddenly twitched, and he looked at Zhang Meng in disbelief. After a while, he said, "Do you know how many people I can hire with 1,000 gold coins?" Zhang Meng shook his head. He really didn't know. He had been in the village for 3 days, and he hadn't seen what gold coins looked like. Chapter 4. Seeing Zhang Meng shaking his head, the young man despised him in his heart. He knew that this kid had not seen the world and did not even know how many people he could hire with 1,000 gold coins. The young man coughed and was about to say something, but he suddenly realized that he did not know how many people he could hire with 1,000 gold coins. After thinking for a long time, the young man coughed softly and said loudly, "In short, 1,000 gold coins can hire a lot of people." At this moment, the brawny man in leather armor came to the young man's side and said in a low voice, "Young master, this kid's background is unknown. It's better not to hire him, so as to avoid trouble." The young man turned to look at him and said with a smile, "Okay, then I'll listen to you. When we get the prey, you'll carry it back." Hearing this, old Luo could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth and stepped aside with a smile. Seeing old Luo step aside, the young man knew that he was scared. He laughed secretly and turned to look at Zhang Meng again with a smile, and stuck out his finger again. "One price, 100 gold coins. If you agree, follow me. If you don't, then forget it." Just now when the two of them were talking, although their voices were very low, Zhang Meng's ears were absolutely sharp, and he had heard everything clearly. Zhang Meng's heart moved. It seemed that the prey they hunted was very valuable. If he followed them to have a look, maybe he could also lead the people of the mountain stronghold to hunt and earn some money. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng did not hesitate and nodded directly. "Okay, I agree." Just like this, Zhang Meng joined the hunting team and followed these people into the deep mountains. Along the way, through the conversations between them, Zhang Meng also figured out who they were. This team had a total of 8 people, divided into 2 groups. The one who talked to Zhang Meng was surnamed Shen. He had 4 subordinates, all of them looked serious, wearing leather armor, with sabers at their waists and a long bow and a few arrows on their back. The other young man was surnamed Zhang. He had 2 subordinates. His 2 subordinates were somewhat different from young Master Shen's 4 subordinate. They didn't wear leather armor, only short sleeves. Their faces looked much more relaxed. They also carried sabers, but they were all carried on their back. While they were on their way, old Luo casually walked over and talked to Zhang Meng. Zhang Meng knew that old Luo wanted to test him, in case he was a bad guy. Zhang Meng didn't have any secrets to begin with, so he didn't try to hide anything. He directly explained his origin and purpose. After hearing that, old Luo nodded and left. The place they were going to hunt was very far away. Even when the sky had turned dark, they still hadn't reached their destination. They could only find an open area to set up camp. It was early spring, and the nights were still quite cold. Everyone started a bonfire, cleaned up the small game they had caught along the way, and roasted it over the fire. Not long after, the aroma of barbecued meat spread in all directions. Old Luo took out the spices he brought with him and sprinkled them on the barbecued meat. The aroma of the barbecued meat became even stronger. Seeing that the meat was almost done, young Master Shen took out a big bag of wine, smiled, and asked everyone to take out their cup. He poured everyone a cup and then said with a smile, "You guys are in luck. This is the best wine from the Binlai Hotel." Prince Zhang said with a smile. Young Master Shen spent a lot of money for this hunt. When we get the feather of the Eagle of Nightmares and give it to Miss Fu, he will definitely win her heart. Prince Zhang said as he raised the wine cup in his hand and said to young Master Shen, "I wish you all the best, brother. Win the heart of the beauty as soon as possible. I'll drink first." After Prince Zhang said that, he tilted his head back and drank the wine in his cup. Young Master Shen heard Prince Zhang's words and laughed happily, but he said humbly, "I'll have to rely on you for this hunt." When Prince Zhang heard that, he was about to say something polite, but suddenly, the howl of a beast interrupted his words. After hearing the sound, one of Prince Zhang's men suddenly jumped up and said in a trembling voice, "Wolf, it's the howl of a wolf." Old Luo heard that and hurriedly stood up and asked, "Are you sure it's the howl of a wolf?" Before the man could answer, a few more howls came from the darkness. Another of Prince Zhang's men couldn't help but frown and said, "Oh no, we might have run into a pack of wolves." As soon as the man finished speaking, the howls became louder. The howls came one after another, the sound was mournful and long. In the silent forest, it was even more terrifying. Hearing so many wolf howls, the guards stood up one after another and drew their sabers. They surrounded the 2 young masters as if they were facing a great enemy. After hearing the howls of the wolves, young Master Shen said with a smile, the wine cup in his hand didn't even shake. "It's just wolves, what's there to be afraid of? Do you have to be so nervous?" Prince Zhang also said with a smile, "With young Master Shen here, what's there to be afraid of? I'm bored of walking in the forest. It's not bad to have a pack of wolves to relieve my boredom." Hearing that, young Master Shen smiled and drank the wine in his cup. "Prince Zhang, you don't have to be so polite. With your Zhang family's marksmanship, dealing with a pack of wolves is a piece of cake." "Ha ha!" Young Master Shen and young Master Zhang looked at each other, then both of them threw their heads back and laughed. When Zhang Mengang heard the wolf's howl, he was also shocked, but then he laughed involuntarily. Would he still be afraid of this pack of wolves? In order to make it easier to observe the surroundings, the campsite was built in a large open space. The closest place to the surrounding forest was at least 100 meters away. As the howls of the wolves drew closer, everyone could faintly see countless black shadows moving around the edge of the forest under the dim moonlight. Old Luo took a quick look at the situation around him, and was shocked. A pack of 40 to 50 wolves wasn't considered a small number, but today's pack of wolves probably had at least 200 to 300. These wolves didn't come out from one place. Instead, they came from all directions. Seeing so many wolves, Old Luo was a little nervous. He quietly retreated to young Master Shun's side and said in a low voice, "There are too many wolves. Young Master, I think you and Prince Zhang have to be careful later. Don't take any risk." Hearing Old Luo's words, young Master Shun put down his wine cup, stood up slowly and looked into the distance. After a while, young Master Shun's face was filled with surprise. "Why are there so many wolves?" Prince Zhang stood up and looked at the wolves in the distance. He was also shocked. He quickly took out his weapon, the 3-section gun, and said seriously, "I didn't expect there to be so many wolves in a pack." Chapter 5. The pack of wolves began to approach from all directions. Old Luo waved his hand and reached for the bow and arrow on his back. He said to the people behind him without turning his head, "Use the bow and arrow to deal with them first." There were 6 attendants in total. 4 of young Master Shun's attendants were armed with bows and arrows. Hearing Old Luo's words, the other 3 attendants also took their bows and arrows from their backs. Old Luo knocked an arrow on the bowstring and stared at the wolves in the distance. When the wolves were within the effective range of his bow and arrow, he let out a roar and loosened his fingers on the bowstring. A sharp arrow shot towards the wolves like a flash of lightning. A moment later, a wolf was sent flying into the air with a scream and landed on the wolves behind it. Following that, the other 3 attendants did not want to be outdone. They also knocked their bows and shot their arrows into the wolves. The 4 archers released arrows with all their might. The wolves that were charging towards them kept screaming, but it did not help. There were just too many wolves. Although many of them were shot dead, the number of wolves did not seem to decrease at all. Old Luo saw that the wolves were getting closer. He waved his hand again and shouted, "Brothers, everyone, surround the 2 young masters. Protect them." As soon as Old Luo finished speaking, young Master Shun had already walked up to him and said with a smile, "You don't have to be so nervous to deal with these wolves." As soon as young Master Shun finished speaking, he was already in the air. In mid-air, he had already pulled out his sword and swung it in front of him, creating a field of stars in front of him. Then, he fell towards the wolves. Stars! As soon as young Master Shun landed, dozens of wolves were immediately covered in the light of the sword. In the blink of an eye, the sharp sword light cut them into pieces. Although young Master Shun killed dozens of wolves with a single swing of his sword, Old Luo frowned. Although young Master Shun's move was powerful, it also consumed a lot of internal energy. If he kept using this move, his internal energy would be depleted very soon. Old Luo waved his hand and shouted, "Brothers, protect young Master Shun." Old Luo pulled out his sword and was about to rush forward. Suddenly, a figure flashed beside him. A white light brushed past him and rushed towards the wolves. The one who rushed over was none other than Prince Zhang. Seeing that young Master Shun had already won, he naturally did not want to be outdone. Prince Zhang rushed to the front of the pack of wolves. Then, he stabilized his body and thrust the 3-section spear forward with all his strength. Then, he shouted loudly, "Go to hell, Long Rainbow!" As soon as his voice fell, the 3-section spear in his hand pierced through the body of the wolf in front of him in the blink of an eye. However, it did not stop and continued to pierce forward. Although Prince Zhang's gun was called a 3-section gun, it was usually only about 1 meter long. If it had 3 sections, it would only be 3 meters long. But now, Prince Zhang's spear had pierced more than 10 meters, piercing through 7 or 8 wolves before stopping. Seeing that he had reached the end of his spear's momentum, Prince Zhang's hand that was holding the spear trembled slightly, and the 3-section spear returned to his hand at lightning speed. When it returned to his hand, it had turned back into a 1 meter long 3-section spear. the two young masters made a grand entrance. Each of them killed more than 20 wolves with one strike. Seeing the two young masters so powerful, the crowd's morale was greatly boosted. They immediately waved their weapons and rushed toward the pack of wolves. Seeing that Prince Zhang had pierced through 7 or 8 wolves with one strike, young Master Shen let out a soft howl again. The sword in his hand turned into dots of starlight again, covering the wolves around him. Stars! As the starlight fell, the wolves howled in agony once again. Zhang Meng saw that they were all incomparably brave and did not want to join in the fun. Seeing that the wolves behind him were also charging over, he hurriedly leaped up and jumped onto a tree. He found a sturdy branch and sat on it to watch the battle below. Although young Master Shen and Prince Zhang were good at martial arts, they were outnumbered after all. Nearly 300 wolves surrounded them tightly. After fighting for less than 15 minutes, they were already at a disadvantage. Although young Master Shen kept using his ultimate moves, he had just killed a pack of wolves and cleared a space. However, in the blink of an eye, the space was filled by a new pack of wolves and continued to besiege him. Among the 8 people, young Master Shen was the best at martial arts. But he was still flustered by the wolves, not to mention the others. Almost all of them were injured, but they all gritted their teeth and held on. When they killed more than half of the wolves, young Master Shen was obviously running out of internal energy. He could not use his unique skills. He could only rely on the sharp sword in his hand to slash back and forth among the wolves. Young Master Zhang was so tired that he was sweating profusely. His inner strength had long been depleted. Without the support of his inner strength, he could not use his ultimate move. All he could do was to continuously stab the wolf in front of him with his 3-section spear. The rest of the guards were even worse. Their armor was soaked in sweat. They were exhausted. Seeing that the situation was critical, old Luo hurriedly shouted to young Master Shen. "Young Master, you go first. We'll cover you." Just then, a thunderous roar came from the depths of the forest. Roar! At this moment, young Master Shen had already leaped into the air. While he was still in the air, he let out a roar. Stars! As soon as his voice fell, specks of starlight appeared beside young Master Shen and enveloped Big Bear. In an instant, specks of blood burst out of Big Bear's body and scattered in the air. Prince Zhang's 3-section spear and young Master Shen's cold light sword were no ordinary weapons. That was why they could break through Big Bear's defense with their sharpness. Everyone, use your bows and arrows to shoot its eyes. In the dark, as soon as old Luo finished speaking, 4 sharp arrows flew towards Big Bear's eyes like lightning. Big Bear just turned its head and the 4 arrows hit its head, but they did not cause any damage. Being played by these little guys, Big Bear was furious. It swung its paw and sent young Master Shen flying in the air. Finally, it stomped on Prince Zhang. Prince Zhang saw young Master Shen being sent flying by Big Bear and knew that things were not going well. He hurriedly used the last of his strength and shouted, "Long Rainbow!" Once again, a ray of light shot out from his hand and pierced Big Bear's paw that was about to stomp on him. This time, Prince Zhang used all his strength to release the ray. Of course, its power was not to be underestimated. Big Bear suddenly felt pain in its paw, but it did not stop stomping. Instead, it sped up. Seeing this, Prince Zhang was scared out of his wits. He wanted to dodge, but it was impossible. That strike just now contained all of his strength. Although it was powerful, it still caused him to pause for a moment. Seeing the giant paw coming closer and closer, Prince Zhang closed his eyes and sighed. It's over. Just then, a shadow flashed beside Prince Zhang. Old Luo appeared beside him and pushed him to roll to the side, dodging Big Bear's paw. After being saved by old Luo, Prince Zhang was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when he felt a huge force coming from behind. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Then, he and old Luo were sent flying. After Big Bear kicked Prince Zhang and old Luo away, it turned around and saw the 3 followers who were shooting arrows in the distance. It suddenly roared and jumped in front of the 3 followers. Once again, it kicked the 3 followers who were already scared out of their wits and sent them flying. Young Master Shun, who was sent flying, spat out a few mouthfuls of blood in the air and landed on a tree. Young Master Shin sat on the tree. He wanted to go down and help, but his stomach was churning too much. If he used any strength, he would immediately spit out a mouthful of blood. He could only watch as Big Bear showed its power and took care of his followers in a few moves. He could not help but sigh in his heart. It seemed that no one could escape. They were all going to be buried here. Young Master Shin looked at Big Bear, who was walking towards him. Chapter 7. After Zhang Meng knocked down Big Bear, the forest fell into silence. Young Master Shun, who was hiding in the tree, did not even dare to breathe. He stared at Big Bear lying on the ground, fearing that it would suddenly stand up and rush towards them. After a short while, under young Master Shun's horrified gaze, Big Bear stood up shakily and let out a fierce roar toward them. The roar made young Master Shun's ears buzz. His heartbeat suddenly accelerated, cold sweat flowed down from his forehead involuntarily, and his hands could not help but tremble as they grabbed the tree trunk. Fortunately, Big Bear only roared once, then turned around and ran into the depths of the forest without looking back. Looking at Big Bear's back, young Master Shun wanted to cry. "Brother, you can leave if you want to. Why did you have to roar? Look how scared I am." After panting for a while, young Master Shun calmed down. Looking at Zhang Meng under the tree, he sighed in his heart. This was his savior. If he was not lucky enough to hire him, he would be finished today. Young Master Shun waved his hand at Zhang Meng under the tree and said gratefully, "Little brother, what's your name again? Thank you so much today. If it were not for you, the consequences would be unimaginable." Zhang Meng smiled indifferently. "Young Master Shun, sit on the tree for a while. I'll go find the others." Young Master Shun nodded quickly. "Little brother, be careful." Just now, when they were fighting, Zhang Meng had been watching the battle from the side. He naturally knew where those guys were sent flying. Soon, Zhang Meng carried them one by one and put them under the tree where young Master Shun was sitting. Young Master Shun, who lived in the tree, inspected his men under the tree like a king. After the inspection, the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch. These people, including Prince Zhang, were lying under the tree and wailing. In this fight, everyone was trampled by Big Bear. They were all injured. Almost all of them were injured and could not move. Seeing everyone's pained expressions, Zhang Meng returned to the tent, took all the wine, and distributed it to everyone. Although the injured could not drink, at this time, no one cared so much. "Let's get drunk first. After getting drunk, at least the wound would not hurt so much." After treating their wounds, he took out some dry rations for them to eat. By the time they fell asleep, it was almost dawn. Zhang Meng yawned. Seeing that everyone was asleep, he also leaned against a tree and slept. The next day, Zhang Meng was awakened by everyone's wails. He opened his eyes and looked around. Everyone was awake, but they were all frowning and groaning in pain. Although the alcohol from last night had stopped their pain, once the alcohol wore off, it would be even more painful. After all, young Master Shun and Prince Zhang had internal energy in their bodies. After a night of recuperation, their injuries were much better. Simple movements such as walking back and forth were no longer a problem. When they saw that Zhang Meng had woken up, they hurriedly staggered over and cupped their fists towards him. "Thank you for saving our lives. My name is Shin Shou. This is my good brother Zhang Qiuming. May I know your name?" Zhang Meng smiled and waved his hand, introducing himself. "My name is Zhang Meng. You can call me Mengzi." "Mengzi?" Shin Shou repeated Zhang Meng's words and said with a smile. "Well, I'll call you the Fierce Brothers from now on." Zhang Meng nodded indifferently. Zhang Qiuming, who was next to Shen Shouwu, also gave Zhang Meng a thumbs up. The fierce brothers are really good. The three of them were polite for a while, and then sat down around the tree. Zhang Qiuming asked first. Brother Meng, who taught you your martial arts? Zhang Meng waved his hand. There's no martial arts, just some brute strength. But the two of you are really extraordinary. Zhang Meng sincerely praised Shen Shouwu's unique skill, stars. It was definitely a unique skill. Not only was the posture beautiful, but the power was also quite strong. Zhang Qiuming's unique skill, long rainbow. It was also a rare unique skill. Combined with his three-section spear, if his strength was a little higher, he would be invincible. Hearing Zhang Meng praise their martial arts, Shen Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming suddenly felt a little proud. Yesterday they couldn't beat the big bear. It wasn't that their unique skills weren't good enough, but that their cultivation was too low. If the elders in the family used this unique skill, they would definitely be able to cause great damage to the big bear. Shen Shouwu said, "The fierce brothers, where are you going? How did you get lost here?" Zhang Meng heard this and sighed. The people in our mountain stronghold don't have enough food to eat, so I came to Greenwood City to see if there's anything I can do to get food for the people in the mountain stronghold. Shen Shouwu heard this and immediately laughed out loud. He pointed at Zhang Qiuming and laughed. Looking for Prince Zhang for matters in Greenwood City is definitely the right choice. Prince Zhang's father is the mayor of Greenwood City. Zhang Meng heard this and hurriedly cupped his hands towards Zhang Qiuming. So it's the son of the mayor of Greenwood City. It's a pleasure to meet you, a pleasure to meet you. Zhang Qiuming waved his hand and said, Brother Meng, if you have any business in Greenwood City, you don't have to be courteous. Just look for me directly. I will definitely be able to help Brother Meng. As Zhang Qiuming said this, he suddenly changed the topic and looked at Shen Shouwu with a smile. The fierce brothers, although my father is the mayor of Greenwood City, young Master Shen's father is the deputy county governor of the South County. In the South County, he is above everyone else. After hearing the identities of the two, Zhang Meng was slightly shocked. He didn't expect the identities of the two to be so powerful. A city had a population of over 1 million, and the South County governed 10 cities. As the deputy county governor of the South County, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was above everyone else. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng couldn't help but ask. The two young masters have noble identities. Why did you come to this place? After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Shen Shouwu lowered his head in embarrassment. Zhang Qiuming laughed. This was my idea. I heard that the Wind Forest mountain range, which is the mountain under our feet. In the depths of the mountain range, a nightmare eagle appeared, so I sent someone to inform young Master Shen. I wanted to team up to hunt that nightmare eagle. Coincidentally, young Master Shen also had something to do, so we came here together. Nightmare eagle. Zhang Meng repeated the name and then asked, What's the use of the nightmare eagle? Is it very valuable? Zhang Qiuming nodded. The nightmare eagle has magic attributes, so there's a high chance that it will have a magic core in its body. Of course, the magic core is useless to us, but it's quite useful to the mages in the magic empire. There are too few species with magic attributes, so every magic core is quite valuable. Zhang Qiuming paused and turned to look at Shen Shouwu before he continued. The magician hurriedly dodged to the side, but with his speed, he could not dodge. The magician was about to be hit by the warrior flying over. Suddenly, a figure rushed in front of the magician and blocked the warrior who was flying over. The person who came was Zhang Meng. He finally saw a magician alive, so naturally, he would not just stand by and watch the magician get hurt. He still had many questions to ask the magician. However, Zhang Meng still understood the principle of keeping a low profile, so after being hit by the warrior, he immediately staggered a few steps and retreated to the magician's side. Seeing Zhang Meng being knocked around, the magician asked with concern. How are you? The voice was gentle and soft, but also slightly hurried. After hearing this voice, Zhang Meng subconsciously asked, You are a girl? Although Zhang Meng's words were rude, the female magician did not care and only asked again with concern. Your injury, is it okay? Zhang Meng hurriedly shook his head. I'm fine, it just hurts a little. While the two of them were talking, the people in front of them were a little overwhelmed. He raised his two-handed sword and walked towards Vilanica. Vilanica was that magician. She was now thanking her savior. Seeing that Dazhai had run away and was no longer in danger, she began to care about Zhang Meng's injuries. Although Zhang Meng kept saying that he was fine, how could Vilanica believe him? The speed of the warrior who flew over just now was quite amazing. Coupled with his own weight, this force was definitely not small. Just when Vilanica said that she would pay for Zhang Meng's treatment, the angry Gerard came over. Gerard first glanced at Vilanica, then turned his head to look at Zhang Meng and said with a sneer, Who are you? Why haven't I seen you before? Are you a spy? Speaking of spies, Gerard just noticed that Zhang Meng's clothes and appearance were clearly not from the Magic Empire. When Gerard saw this, he immediately shouted, Come, take this spy down for me. I want to interrogate him and find out what he's doing here. Gerard was the leader of this team. He was also the first heir of the Custer family, the largest family in Redfire City. In other words, he was commonly known as the leader or the eldest son. These 2 days, the Custer family received a piece of news. The Arat-Un Mountains, which was the Wind Forest Mountains that Shin Shouwu and the others mentioned, was a mountain range. It was just that the names were different in the two countries. There was a nightmare eagle hidden in the Arat-Un Mountains. After hearing this news, it immediately attracted the attention of the Custer family. There was a high chance that the nightmare eagle would brew a magic core. A magic core was not very useful in the Dao Kingdom, but in the Magic Empire it was a treasure. For magicians, as long as there was a magic core, they were willing to spend any amount of money. The key was that they would agree to any conditions. Therefore, the Custer family sent people to investigate the whereabouts of the nightmare eagle. If they found the nightmare eagle and determined its location, they would immediately report back, and the family would send experts to hunt it down. Originally, such a dangerous task like investigating the nightmare eagle would not fall on Gerard's shoulders. However, Gerard discovered that his goddess, the temple's apprentice priest, Vilanica, was also in the team. Originally, investigating the whereabouts of the nightmare eagle did not require a magician. However, after finding the nightmare eagle, a magician was needed. In order to quickly spread the news, the Custer family also prepared 2 magic scrolls for this team. However, in order to activate these 2 magic scrolls, a magician was needed. Therefore, the head of the Custer family, Grimm, invited a magician from the temple, and this magician was Vilanica. Since Vilanica was in the team, Gerard naturally would not let go of this opportunity. Therefore, he begged his father to let him join this team. Now, this unknown kid actually dared to be so close to his Vilanica. All Gerard could do was to say sorry. Vilanica saw that Gerard wanted to send people to capture Zhang Meng and could not help but become anxious and angry. Master Gerald, he is my savior. You have no right to do anything to him. Gerard heard this and sneered. Vilanica, who does this kid think he is? How dare he call himself your savior? If it wasn't for this young master chasing away the earth bear, none of you would have survived. If you really want to talk about saving lives, then this young master is the one who truly saved your life. I'm the one who saved everyone's life. After saying this, Gerard turned to look at the crowd and shouted sternly, Tell me, am I your savior or not? These people were the Custer family's guards, so naturally, they did not dare to offend Gerard. After all, it was just a sentence and nothing could be done. Young Master Gerard is our savior. If it wasn't for Master Gerald using his ultimate move, the flame sword, I'm afraid we would all be dead today. Master Gerald is mighty, invincible. Chapter 11. In the face of his subordinate's flattery, Gerard nodded with satisfaction. Villanica, what do you think? Am I your savior? Villanica did not see why the Bear of Earth ran away, but since everyone said so, it seemed that the Bear of Earth was really driven away by Gerard. Villanica nodded slightly but did not speak. However, this already satisfied Gerard. He turned to look at Zhang Meng and shouted sternly. Tell me, why are you here? What is your purpose? If you dare to lie in front of me, humph. As he spoke, Gerard had already raised his big sword in front of him. It seemed that if Zhang Meng dared to lie, the big sword in his hand would definitely cut Zhang Meng's body. Zhang Meng looked at young Master Gerard, who was wearing a silver armor. With his long golden hair, he could be considered as a pretty boy. However, this had nothing to do with Zhang Meng. I saw that there was a mage here and was very curious, so I came over to take a look. Is there a problem? Vidanica also hurriedly defended Zhang Meng. Master Gerald, if he hadn't blocked Joy's flying over just now, I'm afraid I would have been hit by Joy's. Villanica's good intentions made things worse. If she hadn't explained for Zhang Meng, this matter would have been easier to deal with. However, as soon as she explained, Gerard was unhappy. How could Gerard be happy when his sweetheart spoke for others? Villanica, do you dare to prove for him that he is not a spy? Villanica was speechless for a moment. She had just seen Zhang Meng and did not know his details. How could she prove it? Seeing that Villanica did not speak, Gerard did not want to talk nonsense. He directly raised his two-handed big sword, looked at Zhang Meng, and said coldly, Boy, since you dare to come here to inquire about information, then I'll let you see my power. Gerard raised the two-handed big sword above his head and roared, Flame sword! As soon as Gerard's voice fell, the two-handed big sword in his hand ignited with flames again. Zhang Meng was startled by this scene and subconsciously took 2 steps back. Gerard raised the two-handed big sword and was about to cut down on Zhang Meng when his eyes suddenly narrowed and he froze on the spot. After a while, the sneer on Gerard's face suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a smile. Little brother, since you've come from afar, you must be hungry. When Gerard said this, he placed the two-handed big sword above his head on the ground again and turned to roar at his subordinate. Roast all the prey that we've caught today. I want to have a drink with this little brother. Gerard was the leader of this team and his words were orders. Even if his order was to lie down and sleep immediately, no one would object and would only carry it out. But now, no one cared about Gerard's order. They were all staring blankly at Zhang Meng with an expression of disbelief. Just now, when Zhang Meng retreated, he happened to hit a tree. When he thought about how the earthen bear had only used such a short period of time to kill so many of his people, then he looked at Zhang Meng who was opposite him, and he felt extremely fortunate in his heart. Fortunately, I didn't make a move earlier, otherwise, I would have surely died a horrible death. Suddenly, Gerard's eyes lit up. This brat was so powerful. If he could take him in as his subordinate, wouldn't that be awesome? Gerard carefully thought about the feasibility of this plan, and then looked at Zhang Meng's clothes. He felt that it shouldn't be a problem. Thinking of this, Gerard immediately turned his head and shouted to his subordinate, Hurry and roast the prey. This young master wants to have a good drink with this little bro. After waiting for his subordinates to start the fire, he turned his head and looked at Zhang Meng with a spring breeze smile on his face. Little bro, come over quickly. Let's sit down and talk. Zhang Meng shook his head. He wasn't interested in talking to Gerard. You go to your work. I want to talk to Villanica. Seeing that Zhang Meng ignored him and insisted on talking to Villanica, Gerard's anger ignited in his heart. But in the next moment, seeing the tree behind Zhang Meng, He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Bear with it. Who asked him to be so powerful? Chapter 12. The raging bonfire was quickly lit, and a few prey were roasted on the fire. Soon, the meat was golden brown and emitted a rich aroma. Vilanica handed a piece of roasted meat to Zhang Meng and asked curiously, "Have you fought with the Bear of Earth before today?" Zhang Meng nodded. "Last night, I knocked it down with a big tree, then it got up and ran away." At this point, Zhang Meng did not want to continue on this topic and asked directly, "You're Vilanica?" Vilanica nodded and asked, "What's your name?" "Zhang Meng." "Vilanica, Zhang Meng, you're really not from the Magic Empire. You're from the Doll Kingdom?" Zhang Meng nodded and asked, "Are you a mage?" Vilanica hesitated for a moment before answering, "I'm a priest apprentice of the temple, not a mage." "Zhang Meng, when you were fighting with the Bear of Earth, what was the magic you used?" "Vilanica, that skill is the lowest level lightning attack." At this point, she added a little embarrassedly, "I only know that one magic skill." Zhang Meng smiled and suddenly pointed at the staff in her hand and said, "Can I see this?" Vilanica saw this and hurriedly raised the small wooden stick in her hand and asked, "Do you want to see my staff?" Zhang Meng nodded quickly. Vilanica did not hesitate and directly put the staff in Zhang Meng's hand. This magic staff was the most common magic staff. It was made from a piece of blackwood that could transmit magic power. Its price was not even comparable to a sword or saber. Of course, this was not to say that the staff was worthless. A better staff would be made of better materials and could transmit magic faster. If it was a better staff, it would be inlaid with various enhancement gems. The role of these gems was like an amplifier, increasing the amount of magic released or increasing the speed of releasing magic. How much magic could be added or how much faster the speed of releasing magic depended on the quality and type of the gems. There was no need to list them one by one here. Zhang Meng took the staff made of blackwood and looked at it carefully, but he did not find anything different. He could only return the staff to Veronica and ask, "Is there anything different about it? What's the use of the staff?" Vilanica took the staff and said with a smile, "This staff isn't of much use. It can only channel my mana, but it won't have any amplification effect." In the distance, Gerard saw the two talking enthusiastically and could not help but be angry. He originally wanted to recruit Zhang Meng as his subordinate to increase his strength, but seeing Zhang Meng and Vilanica being so close, Gerard was angry and decided to give up on Zhang Meng. Looking at Zhang Meng in the distance, Gerard sneered. He pulled a guard beside him and whispered a few words. After hearing this, the guard was stunned at first, then a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. Seeing that the guard stood still, Gerard could not help but snort coldly. "Do you want to disobey the order?" The guard was suddenly awakened by Gerard's cold words. He hurriedly responded and turned to leave. Looking at the back of the guard, Gerard, who had been sneering, suddenly shouted, "Add more seasoning for our guest. He has a strong taste, ha ha ha." After a short while, the guard came back with a piece of roasted meat. Looking at the roasted meat in the guard's hand, Gerard sneered and asked, "Did you add enough seasoning?" The guard hurriedly nodded and said, "Yes, 2 people are enough." Hearing this, Gerard nodded with satisfaction. He took the roasted meat in the guard's hand and walked towards Zhang Meng. At this time, Carter also joined the conversation between Zhang Meng and Vilanica. Carter was a berserker. He believed in strength, and the direction of his cultivation was also strength. In this team, he was the strongest. When he was fighting with the Bear of the Earth, only his big axe could cause a little damage to the Bear of the Earth. Carter was promoted to a second-level warrior 5 years ago, but until now, his strength had not increased at all. He was still a second-level warrior. Because of this, he had consulted many experts. However, without exception, all the experts had told him the same thing. Continue to cultivate. Therefore, Carter worked even harder. However, after cultivating for more than a year, his strength still did not increase at all. It was even more hopeless for him to be promoted. Carter's hair almost turned white because of this. Today, when he saw Meng Jing's terrifying strength, he had long wanted to ask for advice, but unfortunately, he did not have the chance. Coincidentally, he saw wine in front of Meng Jing. Taking this as an excuse, he brought the wine bowl to Meng Jing and said with a smile, "Little brother, my name is Carter. May I know your name?" As the saying goes, one does not hit a smiling person. Carter brought the wine and spoke very politely. Zhang Meng hurriedly reached out to take the wine and answered with a smile. "My name is Zhang Meng. You can call me Mengzi." Mengzi. Carter was stunned. He did not expect the other party to be so polite. After thinking for a while, he replied with a smile, "Okay, I'll call you Brother Meng from now on." Hearing this address, Zhang Meng nodded with satisfaction. This kid was quite good at making things up. Moreover, looking at him, it seemed that he had a favor to ask of him. Based on the other party's address, he would help him. Thinking of this, Zhang Meng had to point to the ground beside him. "Sit down, let's sit and talk." Carter was overjoyed when he heard this. He quickly sat beside Zhang Meng, raised the wine in his hand, and said to Zhang Meng, "Brother Meng, let's drink first." Zhang Meng nodded, picked up the wine bowl in his hand, and took a small sip first. In his previous life, if he drank white wine, his alcohol tolerance was only 2 ounces. If it was beer, he could not exceed 2 bottles. The big bowl in his hand was at least a caddy. Looking at the quality of the wine, it was white wine. As soon as the wine entered his mouth, Zhang Meng felt a mellow, slightly spicy, and slightly sweet wine fragrance spread in his mouth. After a while, Zhang Meng swallowed the wine and sighed. "This wine is really good. It's delicious." Carter saw that Zhang Meng was drinking happily, and his heart was quite happy. This wine was not a common one. It was good wine that he brought himself. Carter liked to drink, and he liked to drink good wine. Moreover, his family was rich and could support him to buy good wine. Therefore, every time he went out, he would buy a big bag of good wine and bring it with him. When he was hungry, he would drink a few mouthfuls. "Brother Meng, if it's delicious, drink more. I have more here," Carter said as he took the bag of wine from his waist and placed it in front of Zhang Meng. Zhang Meng did not hesitate. He directly raised his head and drank the big bowl of wine in his hand. Chapter 13. Just as Zhang Meng and Carter were drinking to their heart's content, Gerard walked over with a piece of barbecued meat that had been seasoned. "Little brother, Carter is treating you to a drink. You can't have wine without food, so I'll treat you to barbecued meat." As he spoke, Gerard had already handed the piece of barbecued meat in his hand to Zhang Meng. This piece of barbecued meat was indeed not bad. It had already been roasted to a golden brown, and with some colorful seasonings, it looked very beautiful. Zhang Meng took the barbecued meat, looked at it, and pointed at the seasonings on it. "What's that on it?" Gerard hurriedly explained when he saw Zhang Meng asking. "Little brother, I spent a lot of money to buy these seasonings. How is it? It smells good, doesn't it?" Zhang Meng looked at the barbecued meat in his hand and the seasonings stuck on it. He looked around again and saw Carter looking at the piece of barbecued meat with a shocked expression. His heart skipped a beat, and he knew that there was definitely something wrong with this piece of barbecued meat. But would Zhang Meng be afraid? "Humph!" Carter suddenly shouted when he saw Zhang Meng tear off a piece of barbecued meat and was about to put it into his mouth. "Don't eat it!" Zhang Meng immediately put down the piece of barbecued meat in his hand, turned to look at Carter, and asked in confusion, "Is there a problem?" At this moment, Carter was so anxious that the veins on his forehead were bulging, but he could not say it. He did not look carefully just now. When he heard Meng Jing ask Gerard, He took a closer look at the seasonings on the piece of barbecued meat. When he saw it clearly, he was shocked. People who hunted in the mountains all year round would prepare some poison in case they encountered wild beasts that they could not deal with. At that time, they could use these poisons to kill these wild beasts. Therefore, the poison they brought was quite toxic. It was no exaggeration to say that no matter how powerful the earth bear was, it would still die as long as it ate the poison they concocted. Now, the piece of roasted meat in Meng Jing's hand was covered with the kind of poison that could kill an earth bear. The amount of poison on that piece of meat was simply appalling. It was as if the entire piece of meat had been covered in poison, and the poison had been evenly stuck to every part of the meat. Seeing so much poison on the roast meat, Carter was stunned for a moment. After a long while, he came back to his senses and saw that Zhang Meng was about to eat the roast meat. He was so scared that he hurriedly shouted and stopped Meng Jing. When Gerard heard Carter's words, he was furious. He turned his head and glared at Carter, gritting his teeth and asking, "Carter, is there something wrong with this piece of roast meat?" Seeing Gerard's fierce gaze, Carter lowered his head helplessly. Gerard's family was definitely second to none in Crimson Fire City. In terms of strength, they were extremely powerful. It could be said that if Gerard wanted someone to die, that person would definitely not be able to see the sun tomorrow. The Custer family was just that awesome and powerful. Carter's family, on the other hand, was only a second-rate family in Crimson Fire City. They simply did not have the strength to contend with the Custer family. In terms of martial arts, Carter did not take Gerard seriously at all. Carter was a second-rate warrior. Gerard was a first-rate warrior. Although there was only a small gap between the two of them, Carter would definitely be able to defeat Gerard without getting hurt. However, even if Carter could defeat Gerard, he still did not dare to provoke Gerard. The difference in their family backgrounds was too great. If Gerard's family wanted to destroy Carter's family, it would only take an hour. In order to not cause trouble for his family, Carter could only endure. Seeing that Carter was terrified, Gerard nodded in satisfaction. Just as he was about to turn around and look at Zhang Meng, Carter suddenly raised his head and begged, "Master Gerald, please don't treat this little brother to this piece of barbecued meat. Can you change it to another piece?" Gerard was a little unhappy when he heard this and said angrily, "Do I need your permission to treat others to barbecued meat? Get out of the way. Otherwise, don't blame me for turning hostile." After being reprimanded by Master Gerald, Carter was so angry that his face turned red. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only turn around and desperately give Zhang Meng a look. Gerard saw that Carter was not speaking and ignored him. He turned around and looked at Zhang Meng with a smile. "Little brother, you should eat the barbecued meat while it's hot. Otherwise, it won't taste good when it's cold." Zhang Meng nodded when he heard this. "You're right. Barbecued meat should be eaten while it's hot. However, I can't finish such a big piece of meat myself. Why don't you have some too?" Zhang Meng had already passed the barbecued meat over as he spoke. When Gerard saw this, he was so scared that he immediately took 2 steps back. He was afraid that Zhang Meng would be too enthusiastic and force him to eat a mouthful of barbecue. That would be terrible. At that time, even God would not be able to save him. Zhang Meng did not mind when he saw that Gerard was not eating. He picked up the barbecued meat and placed it in his mouth under Carter's shocked gaze and Gerard's expectant gaze. He started chewing. A moment later, Carter despaired when he saw that Zhang Meng had already swallowed the piece of meat. The barbecued meat is indeed delicious with so much seasoning. Why don't you have some too? Hearing Zhang Meng praise the barbecued meat, Gerard turned to look at Vilanica and laughed coldly in his heart. "Vilanica, this is all your fault." Vilanica saw that Gerard's gaze was cold and had a hint of mockery. Although she did not understand what was going on, she knew that something was going to happen. Zhang Meng ate very quickly. One mouthful of wine, one mouthful of meat. It did not take long for him to finish the entire bag of wine and the barbecued meat. Gerard saw that Zhang Meng had finished the barbecued meat and estimated the time in his heart. He knew that the poison was about to take effect. The fear he had for Zhang Meng immediately disappeared, and he laughed heartily at the sky. After laughing for a while, Gerard lowered his head and looked at Vilanica with a smile. Vilanica, your good friend is about to leave. Aren't you going to say goodbye to him? Vilanica was an apprentice priest of the temple. She was mostly in contact with magic and cultivation. She had never met someone like Gerard. Hearing Gerard's question, Vilanica was a little confused. She turned to Zhang Meng and asked, "Are you leaving?" Zhang Meng wiped the grease on his mouth and nodded. "Wait a moment. I'll give Carter some pointers on his cultivation, and then I'll go back." Haha! Hearing Zhang Meng's answer, Gerard laughed again. After a while, he stopped laughing and looked down at Zhang Meng with a sinister expression. "Kid, you ate the barbecued meat that I added seasoning for you. Do you still want to go back?" Zhang Meng laughed. "Why can't I go back? Do you want me to stay for dinner?" Chapter 14. Gerard laughed maniacally. After a while, he pointed at Zhang Meng and said coldly, "Do you feel pain in your stomach now?" Zhang Meng nodded and touched his stomach. "I ate a little too much. I'm too full." Gerard heard this and his eyes turned cold. "To tell you the truth, you didn't eat too much. It's because you ate the special seasoning that I added for you." At this point, Gerard took another step forward and said in a cold voice, "No matter how powerful you are, as long as you eat this poison, you won't be able to hold on for long." Zhang Meng shook his head. "I just feel a little too full." Gerard looked at Zhang Meng and laughed maniacally. "If I'm not wrong, you're going to collapse right now." Gerard pointed at Zhang Meng and shouted, "Collapse, collapse!" Zhang Meng was speechless as he looked at Gerald's hysterical appearance. He couldn't help but shake his head. He then turned to look at Carter and said with a smile, "I drank your wine, but I don't have anything in return. I'll help you this time." When Carter saw Zhang Meng looking at him, he felt a wave of guilt. He felt that he was too useless. He actually watched Zhang Meng eat the poison with his own eyes. Thinking of this, Carter's eyes turned red and he suddenly shouted, "Brother Meng, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." At the end of his sentence, Carter, the burly man, actually had tears in his eyes. Zhang Meng walked slowly to Carter's side and placed his hand on his shoulder. He scanned his body with his mind. In just a moment, he found the problem. Carter's meridians were damaged in many places. His inner breath was not strong to begin with. If his meridians were damaged, his strength would not increase. Of course, this was not absolute. If Carter cultivated for 30 to 50 years, his inner breath would increase to a certain level and he would be able to repair these damaged meridians. Repairing these damaged meridians was a piece of cake for Zhang Meng. As long as he willed it, those damaged meridians would naturally be restored to their original state. As soon as Zhang Meng finished repairing Carter's meridians, Carter felt a wave of heat spreading throughout his body. In the end, the heat spread throughout his body. This is impossible. Carter was stunned. At this moment, Carter was stunned. Although his strength had not increased in the past 5 years, he had never seen a pig run, but he had at least eaten pork before. If he wasn't wrong, the condition in his body was the standard of a 5th-level warrior. He thought about how he had been stuck as a 2nd-grade warrior for so many years. Now, he had finally broken through. Not only had he broken through, but he had also directly broken through to become a 5th-grade warrior. At this moment, his eyes filled with tears of excitement. He was about to cry. After being excited for a while, Carter suddenly shouted and jumped up. At the same time, he waved his fist and hit a big tree beside him. Crack! After a loud noise, a 20-centimeter thick tree was broken by Carter's punch. Seeing that the tree had been cut down by Carter, the entire place fell silent. Only the sound of the tree falling down echoed in everyone's ears. When the crowd saw Carter knock down the tree with a single punch, they were immediately dumbfounded. Such a thick tree was knocked down by Carter with one punch. Carter was only a second-level warrior. He was only one level higher than everyone else. How could he be so strong? Looking at the fallen tree, Carter was also stunned. Suddenly, he turned around and walked quickly to Zhang Meng. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and said with a face full of tears, "Thank you, Brother Meng. Thank you, Brother Meng, for increasing my strength. Thank you, Brother Meng." After hearing Carter's words, everyone was enlightened. At the same time, they were even more shocked. To be able to increase Carter's strength by so much in such a short period of time was simply unbelievable, especially since Carter had not advanced in many years. This was a well-known fact. Moreover, Carter had visited many experts to solve this problem, but without exception, none of them could solve Carter's problem. Now, this person not only solved Carter's problem in such a short period of time, but also increased his strength by so much. For a moment, everyone looked at Zhang Meng. Their eyes were full of anticipation and enthusiasm, almost melting Zhang Meng. At this time, Gerard was also stunned. Not only was Zhang Meng not poisoned to death, but he also increased Carter's strength by so much in such a short period of time. Carter was able to knock down such a thick tree with one punch. According to Gerard's estimation, Carter might have already become a fifth-level warrior. At the thought of a fifth-level warrior, Gerard's heart was filled with regret. If he hadn't poisoned Zhang Meng, he would have been able to shamelessly beg Zhang Meng. Perhaps he would have been able to become a fifth-rank warrior. In the eyes of outsiders, as the first heir of the Custer family, it was natural for him to be incomparably glorious. However, every family had its own difficulties. Carter's aptitude was very ordinary. After practicing for so long and taking all kinds of elixirs, he was still only a first-level warrior. It didn't matter if he cultivated slowly. He swore that he could work harder. However, what gave him a headache was that Carter's younger brother, Leslie, was extremely talented in martial arts. Although Leslie was younger than Carter by 3 years, he was already a third-level warrior. Moreover, Leslie's teacher had once told the head of the Custer family, Moria. Leslie was definitely a martial arts genius. It was believed that before the age of 35, he would definitely be able to advance to the Xiantian realm, which was the rank of a master. Although Gerard was the first heir, it did not mean that he would definitely become the head of the Custer family. If Gerard was still a level 3 or 4 warrior when Leslie became a master, he might have to step aside even though he was the number 1 successor. As the head of a large family, not only did he have to have enough experience, he also had to be the strongest. For the sake of his own strength, Gerard had been so worried that his hair had turned white. He had thought of all kinds of ways to increase his strength, but he had been unable to do so. Now the opportunity was right in front of him. The person in front of him could definitely increase his strength, but he had drugged him. Moreover, he had drugged him with the most potent poison. What made Gerard the most uncomfortable was that it was fine to poison him, but why did he have to say it out loud? Looking at the elated Carter, Gerard only wanted to find a hole to crawl into and cry his heart out. Zhang Meng patted Carter's shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't mention it. You're welcome. You've treated me to some good wine, and I'll treat your injuries. We're even." As soon as Zhang Meng finished speaking, Gerard had already shouted, "Quickly bring out our best wine. I want to entertain an important guest." Chapter 15. Zhang Meng turned his head to look at Valenica and said with a smile, "It's getting late, I have to go back. The next time we meet, I'll have to ask you for some advice on magic." Valenica was already stunned by what had just happened. Although she wasn't a warrior, that didn't stop her from knowing about warriors. To be able to raise Carter from a second-level warrior to a fifth-level warrior, this was simply impossible. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, Vilanica nodded subconsciously. Then, she came to her senses and hurriedly asked, "Are you leaving?" Zhang Meng nodded. "I've eaten the barbecue and drunk the wine. It's time for me to go back. Goodbye." After speaking, Zhang Meng looked at Carter again, nodded, and turned to walk into the depths of the forest. Looking at Zhang Meng's back, Carter suddenly shouted, "Brother Meng, let me follow you." Hearing this, Zhang Meng didn't turn his head. He just waved his hand and laughed. "Your strength is too low. When your strength is enough, I'll allow you to follow me." As he spoke, Zhang Meng had already walked into the forest. At this time, no one in the group spoke. They all looked at Zhang Meng's back in shock. When Zhang Meng said that Carter's strength was too low, no one thought that Zhang Meng was bragging. Instead, they thought that it was natural. To be able to raise a person's strength from a second-level warrior to a fifth-level warrior, this person's strength should be at least at the master level. Some people even suspected that Zhang Meng's level might be at the grandmaster level. Slap. The silence was suddenly disrupted by the sound of a slap. Everyone looked at the sound and saw that Gerard's face was red and swollen. When Gerard saw Zhang Meng's back, his heart was filled with regret and he couldn't help but slap his own face. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Gerard was ashamed and angry at the same time. He shouted in a stern voice, "What are you all looking at? Haven't you seen someone kill a mosquito before?" It wasn't easy to go back the way they came. Zhang Meng didn't know the way, and he had already walked so far. He could only slowly walk back while searching. Just like that, they walked until the sky was a little dark before they rushed back to the camp. Since he was still taking the same path, he naturally didn't see any prey. Zhang Meng returned empty-handed. Before he entered the camp, he smelled the aroma of barbecued meat. He couldn't help but feel happy. Looks like Fan Shouwu and the others aren't idiots. They still know to hunt for their own food, Zhang Meng thought as he walked towards the camp. He didn't walk far before he realized that something was wrong. At this moment, there was a bonfire burning in the middle of the camp. Fan Shouwu and the others were sitting around the bonfire. Everything was normal. The only thing that wasn't normal was that there were 5 more people around the bonfire. 5 people that Zhang Meng didn't know. Before Zhang Meng could get close, he heard someone yell, "Who dares to sneak around here?" Zhang Meng was shocked by this voice. He hurriedly looked towards the source of the voice and realized that the person who yelled was one of the 5 people that he didn't know. Everyone around the bonfire was alarmed by this voice and hurriedly looked towards Zhang Meng. Seeing that it was Zhang Meng, Shen Shouwu hurriedly stood up and waved at Zhang Meng. "The fierce brothers, you're back. Come and sit." The middle-aged man saw that Shen Shouwu knew the person and relaxed. He then looked at Shen Shouwu and asked in a low voice, "Who is this person?" Shen Shouwu also replied in a low voice, "He's the one that I told you about. The one that chased the bear of earth away." Hearing this, the middle-aged man carefully looked at Zhang Meng who was walking over. He frowned and couldn't help but feel puzzled. He was a master and had already entered the innate realm. When he first arrived here, he had already heard about the big bear from Shen Shouwu. After listening to Shen Shouwu's description of the big bear, he immediately knew that the big bear was the bear of earth. To be able to chase the bear of earth away, this person's strength was definitely quite high. As the saying goes, heroes appreciate each other. He wanted to make friends with him. However, now that he saw Zhang Meng, he couldn't help but feel puzzled. Because he didn't feel the existence of any inner strength on Zhang Meng's body. It was a bit unbelievable that he could chase the bear of earth away with just brute force. However, Zhang Meng was the one that chased the bear of earth away after all, so he still had to be polite. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man stood up and cupped his fists towards Zhang Meng, speaking in a clear voice. "I'm the guard captain of the county governor's mansion, Mu Hongyi. May I know your name, little brother? Seeing that this person was so polite, Zhang Meng didn't dare to neglect and hurriedly saluted and replied. My name is Zhang Meng. Mu Hongyi pointed to the seat beside him and said with a smile. Little brother, you just came back. I'm sure you haven't eaten yet. Come and sit down. Let's have a drink. Zhang Meng nodded and sat down beside the middle-aged man. As soon as Zhang Meng sat down, Mu Hongyi smiled and pointed to the 4 people beside him and introduced them. They are my 4 brothers, Ho Daqi, Lan Jiong, Zhang Yuntao, and Xin Feisher. Ho Daqi was a thin middle-aged man. Lan Jiong and Zhang Yuntao's physiques were much stronger. Xin Feisher had a medium build. Unlike the others, he had a short beard under his chin. After listening to Mu Hongyi's introduction, Zhang Meng also hurriedly saluted the 4 of them. After everyone exchanged pleasantries, Mu Hongyi asked with a smile. I heard from them that last night, you knocked down the bear of earth with just a big tree. Zhang Meng hurriedly said politely. I was lucky. Mu Hongyi nodded with a smile and continued to ask. Little brother, where did you learn from? To be able to teach someone like you, your master must be extraordinary. Zhang Meng said, I don't have any master. I just have some brute strength. I don't know any martial arts. As soon as Zhang Meng's voice fell, Xin Feisher, who was sitting beside him, suddenly sneered. You are indeed very lucky. If that bear of earth didn't run away and you don't know any martial arts, in my opinion, you might have. Although Xin Feisher didn't finish his words, everyone understood the meaning of his 2 cold snorts. Not knowing any martial arts and just relying on brute strength was indeed nothing to boast about. Although the bear of earth was strong and its defense was very strong, in front of a martial arts master, it was still not enough. Zhang Meng listened to Xin Feisher's words and was a little unhappy in his heart. I drove away the bear of earth. This is an indisputable fact. If you have the ability, you should also find an bear of earth and see if you can be lucky. Although Zhang Meng wanted to lose his temper and beat Xin Feisher into a meat patty with 1 punch, he thought that Mu Hongyi was still very polite. He should at least give him some face. Chapter 16. As soon as Xin Feisher said this, the area around the bonfire fell into silence. Mu Hongyi was also a little unhappy when he saw his brother speak so mercilessly. However, he had to give his brother some face no matter what. Mu Hongyi was about to persuade him, but Ho Daqi, who was sitting next to Xin Feisher, spoke first. Little brother, don't listen to him, he's a little drunk. People were like this. When you were really awesome, you didn't want to pretend to be awesome. It was like an ant was dissatisfied with a person and hit him with its head. Do you think that the person would fly into a rage? Of course not, because the person already had the ability to control the ant's life and death. How could the person have the mind to fight with him? Zhang Meng was like this. In his eyes, Xin Feisher was no different from an ant. If he wanted to deal with Xin Feisher, he didn't even need to do it himself. He only needed to blow at Xin Feisher to kill him. This was not Zhang Meng boasting, it was the truth. Although Zhang Meng thought so, Xin Feisher didn't think so. Among the 5, Xin Feisher was ranked 5th, the weakest one. He didn't accept it. He always wanted to take the opportunity to move up his ranking. So, he went around picking on his brothers. Gradually, his ranking didn't rise. Instead, he fell into the habit of picking on others. At this moment, after hearing Ho Daqi's words, Xin Feisher was overjoyed. Ho Daqi was ranked 2nd among the 5 people. His best weapon was an iron bow. His archery skills were unpredictable and no one could match him. Xin Feisher had never thought about the position of the leader because he had seen Mu Hongyi make a move. If Mu Hongyi used his unique skill, flowing light, Xin Feisher believed that he would never be able to catch it. So, Xin Feisher had never thought about the position of the leader, but it was hard to say about the 2nd position. Although Ho Daki's archery skills were unparalleled, Shin Feisher believed that in close combat, Ho Daki was definitely not his opponent. After hearing Ho Daki's words, Shin Feisher reached out and stroked the short beard under his chin. He sneered and said, "Second brother, don't you agree with me?" Ho Daki was a straightforward person and didn't have any tricks up his sleeve. Hearing Shin Feisher's question, he smiled and said, "Fifth brother, no matter what, this little brother can be considered to be rather formidable since he was able to drive away the earthen bear with his strength alone." "Humph!" Shin Feisher snorted, pointed at Zhang Meng and sneered. "Second brother, if the earth bear didn't run away and continued to fight with him, who do you think would win in the end?" When Ho Daki heard this, he glanced at Zhang Meng and replied, "If the earthen bear continues to fight, it's hard to say who will win." Shin Feisher asked after hearing that. "Then, second brother, what's wrong with me saying that this young man was lucky enough to escape with his life?" Ho Daki listened to Shin Feisher and was a little stunned. For a moment, he couldn't find the words to refute him. Seeing that the two of them were about to quarrel, Mu Hongyi's expression immediately became ugly. Immediately after, he shouted loudly, "Stop talking!" Mu Hongyi's words were still very effective. After his shout, Shin Feisher and Ho Daki stopped talking. They both lowered their heads and drank silently. Without Shin Feisher, the nitpicky guy, the atmosphere in the field became better after a while. Seeing that everyone was in high spirits, Zhang Meng was surprised to find that all the wailing and screaming had disappeared. Even old Luo, who was still limping when Zhang Meng left, was no longer limping. He actually gathered around the bonfire and began to drink with everyone. Seeing this strange thing, Zhang Meng hurriedly asked Fan Shouwu who was next to him. Fan Shouwu heard this and hurriedly cupped his hands towards Mu Hongyi who was sitting in the middle. "This is all thanks to the holy medicine that Lord Mu and the others brought for healing. That's why I can recover in such a short time." Mu Hongyi heard this and sighed. "It's a pity that those medicines have been used up. When we encounter the nightmare eagle, if someone is injured, there won't be any medicine left." Shin Feisher, who had been silent, immediately flattered his boss when he heard him speak. "What are you afraid of? With Big Brother here, what is there to be afraid of?" Speaking of this, Shin Feisher sighed again before continuing. "No matter how powerful the nightmare eagle is, I'm afraid it will only end up with its soul scattered when it encounters Big Brother's flowing light." When Mu Hongyi heard this, although he did not say anything, Zhang Meng could clearly see the pride that flashed in his eyes. Although Shin Feisher liked to nitpick, he absolutely did not dare to nitpick in front of his boss. Instead, he deliberately flattered him. Hearing this, Shin Shouwu also clapped his hands and exclaimed, "Indeed, with Lord Mu here, there is really nothing to be afraid of. I was lucky enough to see Lord Mu's unique skill, flowing light, once. It is really powerful." Shin Feisher laughed again. "Big Brother, look, I was right. Even the younger generation knows that Big Brother is powerful. Now, Big Brother, you have no choice but to admit it." Mu Hongyi laughed heartily after being praised by the two. Then, he raised the wine glass in front of him and said with a smile, "Come, let's drink to the nightmare eagle that we can capture." After Mu Hongyi finished his words, he was about to raise his wine glass to drink. Ho Daki, who was sitting beside him, said with a worried face, "Big Brother, I'm afraid it's not that simple. I've also heard of the nightmare eagle. Legend has it that the feathers on the nightmare eagle's body have a very strong defense. Not only that, the nightmare eagle also has the ability to attack with magic. It's better to be careful when we go to hunt the nightmare eagle this time." Shin Feisher was overjoyed when he heard this. This was like giving a pillow when he was sleepy. "Second brother, what are you talking about? Although the nightmare eagle is powerful, can it be more powerful than Big Brother? If you don't dare to go, then you can go back. I believe that Big Brother will not stop you." Speaking of this, Shin Feisher turned to look at Mu Hongyi and asked with a smile, Second brother is afraid now and wants to go back. Big brother, you won't blame him for being cowardly, right? At this moment, Mu Hongyi's face was a little ugly. He had just raised his wine glass and stopped in front of him. He didn't know if he should drink or not. Second brother, if you really want to go back, I won't stop you, but you have to think carefully. Although Mu Hongyi didn't finish his words, everyone knew that if Ho Daki dared to go back now, Mu Hongyi would definitely be very dissatisfied. Seeing that Ho Daki was sitting there without speaking, Shin Feisher was a little anxious. If Ho Daki didn't go back, wouldn't his performance be in vain? Thinking of this, Shin Feisher raised the wine glass in front of him and walked quickly to Ho Daki. He said with a cold smile, "Second brother, since you want to go back, I'll give you a toast first. After drinking, you can go back. Take it as me sending you off." Chapter 17. Ho Daki looked at Shin Feisher awkwardly. He didn't know whether to drink or not. If he drank, he would have to leave immediately. If he didn't drink, Shin Feisher looked as if he was going to force him to drink. Ho Daki was a little angry. He immediately stood up and pushed away the wine glass in Shin Feisher's hand and said unhappily, "Old Five, what do you mean? How could Shin Feisher let go of such a good opportunity? As long as he put in more effort, Ho Daki would leave in anger." Shin Feisher pretended to be ignorant and asked, "Second brother, didn't you say that the Eagle of Nightmares was very powerful and you were afraid that we wouldn't be able to resist and wanted to go back?" Ho Daki heard this and immediately became angry. He reached out and pushed Shin Feisher and said angrily, "Old Five, what nonsense are you talking about? When did I say that I wanted to go back?" Ho Daki didn't use much strength in this push, but Shin Feisher took 3 or 4 steps back and sat on the ground. A red light flashed across his face, and even the wine glass in his hand fell to the side. Seeing the two arguing like this, the third brother Lan Zi hurriedly gave his junior brother a look. Then, he strode to Shin Feisher's side and helped him up. The fourth brother Zhang Yuntao also hurriedly stood up and grabbed Ho Daki's arm with both hands and tried to persuade him. "Second brother, don't be angry. We're all brothers. If there's anything, we can talk about it." Ho Daki was a little dumbfounded. He didn't use any strength just now. How could he push Old Five so far away? Could it be that his power has greatly increased? After Shin Feisher was helped up by Lan Zi, his face became very ugly. He suddenly broke free from Lan Zi's support and shouted loudly, "Second brother, is this how you treat your brothers? I offered you a toast with good intentions, but you secretly plotted against me." Shin Feisher said and turned to look at Mu Hongyi. He was a little agitated. "Big brother, second brother is too much. I want to challenge him. I hope you can agree." Hearing Shin Feisher's words, Mu Hongyi was a little embarrassed. He turned to look at Ho Daki. Mu Hongyi believed that no matter how many reasons Ho Daki had, he should not have been so heavy-handed. Therefore, he wanted to hear Ho Daki's explanation. Ho Daki looked at the aggrieved Shin Feisher. Even if he was stupid, he understood. Just now, he just casually pushed Shin Feisher. It was impossible for him to push Shin Feisher that far. The only explanation was that Shin Feisher was pretending. Seeing his big brother looking over, Ho Daki hurriedly shouted, "Big brother, don't listen to him. He's talking nonsense. I clearly didn't use any strength just now. He's just faking it for us to see." Mu Hongyi was stunned. Before he could react, Shin Feisher had already roared, "How dare you say that I'm faking it? I'll kill you!" As he spoke, Shin Feisher quickly rushed towards Ho Daki. The distance between Shin Feisher and Ho Daki was not far, and Shin Feisher had suddenly launched an attack. At this moment, even if everyone wanted to stop him, they couldn't. They could only watch as Shin Feisher rushed towards Ho Daki like lightning. Ho Daki also didn't expect Shin Feisher to suddenly attack. In addition, He was a long-range attacker and not good at close combat. By the time he reacted, Shin Feisher had already rushed in front of him. Seeing Shin Feisher's ferocious expression and his fist coming towards him, Hodaki's heart suddenly turned cold. Shin Feisher was not good at using weapons. His strongest skill was his fist. His most powerful martial art was called Heart-Destroying Fist. Heart-Destroying Fist, as the name implied, after hitting the enemy, the power of the fist would directly destroy the enemy's internal organs. It was considered an extremely powerful boxing skill. Looking at the appearance of Shin Feisher gnashing his teeth, Hodaki believed that his punch was absolutely serious. If he was hit, he might be finished. Others didn't know the power of Shin Feisher's fist, but Mu Hongi and the other four all knew. They wanted to stop him, but how could they make it in time? They could only watch as Shin Feisher fiercely rushed towards Hodaki. Just when everyone felt that Hodaki would be seriously injured by Shin Feisher this time, Shin Feisher's next performance suddenly made everyone stunned. Everyone saw Shin Feisher waving his fist and rushing towards Hodaki. However, just as he was about to reach Hodaki, Shin Feisher suddenly came to a sudden stop. Then, his knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. This was nothing. After Shin Feisher knelt on the ground, his head suddenly leaned forward and he actually kowtowed to Hodaki. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. They never thought that Shin Feisher would rush over so quickly in order to apologize to Hodaki. He apologized and kowtowed to admit his mistake with the highest standard. Everyone stared at this scene with their mouths agape. The scene fell into silence. No one spoke. They couldn't believe their own eyes. After a long while, Shin Feisher suddenly jumped up. When he was about to speak, Hodaki had already stepped forward and grabbed his hands. He said with some emotion, "Fifth brother, you can't do this. We are all good brothers. Even if you are wrong, you don't have to do this." Mu Hongi also came over and patted Shin Feisher's shoulder affectionately and praised. "Fifth brother, I didn't misjudge you. You are really good. Well done." Shin Feisher looked at Hodaki and then turned to look at Mu Hongi. He opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. Zhang Yuntao grabbed Shin Feisher's arm and said with a smile, "Fifth brother, since you know you are wrong, don't mention the past. Let's go and have a drink." Shin Feisher was a little confused. He clearly remembered that the strength of his punch could definitely take Hodaki's life. But how did this happen? He only remembered that when he rushed over, when he was almost in front of Hodaki, he felt something tripping his feet. Then, he came to a sudden stop and knelt there. Then, he felt that his waist was weak and couldn't support his body anymore. Then, his waist went soft and his head fell to the ground. What was going on? What was tripping him? When Shin Feisher stood up, he had already carefully checked the ground. There was nothing on the ground, not even a big stone. At this moment, even Shin Feisher himself was a little suspicious. He suspected that he rushed over to apologize to Hodaki. Shin Feisher returned to the bonfire. Everyone toasted him and praised him for his magnanimity. They praised him for being able to correct his mistake. Hodaki even drank 3 cups of wine with him to increase the friendship between brothers. Chapter 18. Although everyone kept toasting Shin Feisher in their hearts, they despised his character to the extreme. Just now, if Shin Feisher made a move on Hodaki, everyone would say that he was extremely vicious, but they would also say that he was decisive and dared to take responsibility for his actions. However, like this, his momentum was as fierce as a tiger, a man-eating tiger. He acted like a mouse, a timid mouse. As long as there was a little wind blowing grass, he would be scared. Shin Feisher also saw it, although everyone toasted him. He could clearly see the contempt in their eyes. Shin Feisher was extremely unhappy, but what could he do? If he dared to pick a bone, everyone would think that he was a capricious villain. I'm afraid that the boss would definitely drive him away. This was not the result he wanted. Zhang Meng was watching from the side, but he was in a good mood. That's right, what happened just now was all done by him. Shin Feisher was unreasonable, he had long been impatient with him, but to fix him for no reason was a bit bullying. Although Zhang Meng wanted to let him go, Shin Feisher was looking for trouble, so he couldn't blame others. Seeing Shin Feisher's embarrassed face, Zhang Meng also picked up a glass of wine, walked to him with a smile, and said with emotion, Shin Daren's tolerance is really admirable. As long as you are wrong, you will kowtow and admit your mistake. It's really amazing, I've seen it. When Shin Feisher heard this, his angry face had turned into a pig's liver color, and his heart was jumping with anger. He stood up abruptly and waved his fist, wanting to send this annoying guy flying. However, at this time, suddenly, Shin Feisher only felt his knees soften. Unknowingly, he knelt down again. Not only that, the feeling of weakness in his waist appeared again, so he kowtowed to Zhang Meng again. At this time, in order to facilitate the toast, everyone surrounded Shin Feisher not far away. After hearing Zhang Meng's words, everyone was shocked. Even the boss Mu Hongyi began to worry. In any case, Ho Daki was Shin Feisher's second brother. Shin Feisher apologizing to Ho Daki was understandable. However, Zhang Meng was just an outsider and his junior. How dare he provoke him like this? Thinking of this, Mu Hongyi hurriedly stepped forward, wanting to stop the disaster that was about to happen. However, what happened next shocked Mu Hongyi. Shin Feisher knelt down and kowtowed again. Shin Feisher's movements were so proficient that they had reached the point where practice makes perfect. His knees went soft and he knelt down. He leaned forward and kowtowed. This. Mu Hongyi rubbed his eyes in disbelief. After he was sure that he wasn't mistaken, his heart was in turmoil. He never thought that old Fifth would be so humble and courteous. As soon as he found out that he was wrong, he immediately knelt down and kowtowed to apologize. Mu Hongyi sighed and hurriedly stepped forward. He helped Shin Feisher up and said meaningfully, Laowu, I'm very happy that you're humble and polite. However, there are many other ways to apologize. For example, if you know that you've done something wrong, you can just apologize to this little brother verbally. Why do you? Alas. In the end, Mu Hongyi couldn't continue. He could only sigh and end his words. It should be known that Shin Feisher was in cahoots with them. If Shin Feisher kept kowtowing to others in the future, they, as brothers, would also lose face. At this moment, Shin Feisher was also inexplicably horrified. After he knelt down and kowtowed skillfully, he thought that all of this was done by the boy in front of him. However, the boy in front of him didn't move at all. Even the hand holding the wine glass didn't move. The smile on his face didn't change either. This meant that all of this was not done by the boy in front of him, but by someone else. Shin Feisher looked around. There were only a few of his brothers, Shin Shouwu and his guards. Shin Shouwu and his guards couldn't have such high martial arts skills. As for his brothers, Shin Feisher knew very well that even if the eldest brother, Mu Hongyi, personally made a move, it was impossible for him to have such great ability. Looking at the dark forest around him, Shin Feisher's forehead suddenly broke out in cold sweat. He felt that someone must have been hiding in the forest and plotting against him. At the thought that someone was plotting against him, the cautious Shin Feisher didn't even dare to say a word. He said goodbye to his brothers and hurried back to the tent. Looking at Shin Feisher's departing figure, Ho Daki suddenly spoke. Eldest brother, what's wrong with Laowu today? Why did he change so much? Mu Hongyi shook his head. I don't know either. Looking at Shin Shouwu and his guards, Mu Hongyi felt a little embarrassed. Originally, when the 5 of them had arrived, they were in high spirits and full of mettle. As the 5 great guards of the governor's mansion, they definitely had the right to be proud. There were a total of 18 guards in the governor's mansion. Their ranking was also based on the level of their martial arts skills. Among the 18 guards, Mu Hongyi's martial arts skills were ranked third because there were 2 commanders above him. The 18 guards of the governor's mansion were famous in the entire South County. Very few people were their match. This time, if Fan Shouwu could get the news that the Nightmare Eagle had appeared here, the governor would naturally also get it. Fan Shouwu wanted to give the black feather cloak to a beauty, so how could the governor not want to give this treasure to someone? Therefore, the governor sent 5 guards, led by the captain, Mu Hongyi, to hunt the Nightmare Eagle and obtain the black feather cloak. Due to the fact that Fan Shouwu and the others were taking the same route as Mu Hongyi and the others, it was no surprise that they encountered each other. Fan Shouwu naturally knew how powerful Mu Hongyi was, so he was very respectful to Mu Hongyi and the other 5 people and flattered them non-stop. Mu Hongyi relied on his high status and martial arts skills, so he naturally accepted everyone's respect and flattery with a clear conscience. However, just as Mu Hongyi and the others were feeling smug, Shin Feisher seemed to be sick and kowtowed everywhere to admit his mistake. This was like a certain family's son kowtowing and apologizing to others whenever he made a mistake. Then, his parents would probably be embarrassed. Seeing everyone's strange gazes, Mu Hongyi felt that there was no point in staying any longer. He used the excuse that he was a little tired from the journey and returned to the tent. When the rest of the guards saw that their boss had gone back, they also took their leave one after another. As soon as he returned to the tent, Mu Hongyi's face immediately darkened. He saw Shin Feisher coming over and said angrily, "What's the matter? What happened today? You did such an unbearable thing. Where are we going to put our faces?" Chapter 19. After Mu Hongyi and the others returned to the tent, Fan Shouwu went up to Zhang Meng and asked in a low voice, "The fierce brothers, why would Shin Shiwei kowtow to you?" Zhang Meng heard this and spread out his hands. "How would I know? You saw it too. I only said a few words and he knelt down and kowtowed." At this point, Zhang Meng held back the laughter in his heart and pretended not to know anything. "I say, does that Shin Shiwei have this problem? He kowtows whenever he sees someone." Fan Shouwu heard this and looked at Zhang Meng for a while. Then he suddenly patted Zhang Meng's shoulder and laughed. "Problem? It seems that he really has this problem." Thanks to the healing medicine that Mu Hongyi brought, everyone recovered after a night's rest. The next day, everyone left the camp and continued to walk deeper into the mountains. Along the way, Mu Hongyi and the others acted as if they were facing a great enemy. Their hands were always on their weapons and they were always observing their surroundings. Shin Feisher was like a bird that was startled by the twang of a bough. As long as there was even the slightest movement, he would immediately hide in the crowd and only come out after he had ascertained the situation. Shin Feisher's actions not only made Shin Shouwu and the others laugh in their hearts, but even Mu Hongyi felt ashamed. But he also understood Shin Feisher's actions. Yesterday, when he returned to the tent, Shin Feisher confessed to him that someone had plotted against him. Mu Hongyi suddenly realized, but at the same time, he was secretly on guard. Although Shin Feisher's martial arts were not the highest among them, he was definitely not the lowest either. To be able to plot against Shin Feisher without anyone noticing, this person's martial arts were probably higher than everyone's, but definitely not lower. After lunch, everyone continued on their journey. Not long after, Mu Hongyi, who was walking in the middle of the group, suddenly frowned and turned to Shin Shouwu behind him. "Tell everyone to stop, there's someone in front." Fan Shouwu heard this and was shocked. He hurriedly waved his hand and told everyone to stop. Everyone's martial arts were naturally not as high as Mu Hongyi's. They didn't hear anything and just looked at Mu Hongyi in confusion. Shin Feisher was so scared that he hid behind Mu Hongyi. Mu Hongyi turned to look at Ho Daki and said in a low voice, "Second brother, your Qing Gong is the best. Why don't you go check it out?" Hearing this, Ho Daki nodded. He turned around and was about to go investigate. Mu Hongyi suddenly exhorted, Second brother, don't act rashly. Once you've ascertained the situation, come back and report immediately. After Hodaki left, Mu Hongi looked around again and said in a low voice, "Get ready, everyone." They didn't know whether the person in front of them was friend or foe, so it was better to take some precautions. Just in case it was an enemy, it would be better to be prepared. After a while, Hodaki came back with bad news. About 100 meters away, there was a team of more than a dozen people resting there. Moreover, that team had also discovered the situation here and was rushing over. As soon as Hodaki's voice fell, a few people walked out of the woods not far away. After seeing the attire of these people, Mu Hongi's eyes narrowed. Mu Hongi could tell that these people were not from the Dao Kingdom, but from the Magic Empire. Not only did these people look different from him, but their attire was also different. The people who came out were all wearing leather armor and the weapons in their hands were much more cumbersome. As time passed, more and more people came out of the wood. In the end, Mu Hongi counted a total of 18 people. One of them was a big man wearing silver mail armor and holding a two-handed sword. He should be the leader of this group. After everyone walked out of the woods, a relatively thin man quickly walked forward and shouted at Mu Hongi. "Who are you? What are you doing in our cold moon city?" Hearing the question, Hodaki turned to look at Mu Hongi. Mu Hongi naturally understood what he meant and didn't answer. He just nodded slightly. Seeing this, Hodaki turned around and quickly walked out of the crowd and shouted at the man. "This is clearly the territory of the Dao Kingdom. When did it become the territory of Cold Moon City? Why have I never heard of it?" Everyone walked on the mountain ridge, and the boundary between the two countries was on the mountain ridge. Therefore, the division of territory on the mountain ridge was also very vague. Sure enough, after hearing Hodaki's answer, the thin man didn't buy it. He immediately sneered and said loudly, "This mountain ridge is the territory of our Cold Moon City. Now that you have crossed the boundary, if you retreat now, I can let bygones be bygones. If you dare to continue to stay here, don't blame me for being impolite." As the skinny man spoke, he pulled out a dagger from his boot and continued to speak. "I will count to 3. If you don't retreat, Although the thin man didn't finish his words, everyone understood what he meant. Hearing this, Hodaki was even more furious. He immediately took out his iron bow and was ready to teach this guy a lesson. At this moment, Fan Shouwu suddenly walked up and laughed loudly. "Since you want to fight, then let me accompany you." Hodaki thought for a moment and didn't say anything else. He was a long-range attacker, and close combat was his weakness. Seeing Hodaki take a step back, Fan Shouwu immediately took out his cold light sword and rushed towards his opponent. Seeing Fan Shouwu rush over, the thin man's mouth curved into a cold smile. He also raised his dagger and went up to meet him. Fan Shouwu wanted to show his strength to his opponent. As soon as the two sides got close, he immediately exerted strength in his legs and jumped into the air. He roared, "Stars!" In an instant, in front of Fan Shouwu, dozens of sword flowers appeared. It was like a sky full of stars, covering the enemy. Seeing the sky full of stars, the thin man was also shocked. However, he wasn't afraid. He only sneered and immediately waved the dagger in his hand, creating a bright light that blocked Fan Shouwu's attack. Ding ding ding, the two weapons clashed together, and a series of metal clashing sounds rang out. The sounds continued for a while before calming down. After the two finished their moves, Fan Shouwu was immediately sent flying back. He flew for 4 to 5 meters before landing on the ground. Then, a look of shock appeared on his face. He didn't think that his opponent would be so fast. He had created a total of 23 stars, but his opponent had blocked them all in the blink of an eye. Not only did he block them, he even sent him flying back. It seemed that this person's martial arts were much higher than his. Chapter 20. Seeing that Fan Shouwu had been sent flying, the small and skinny man laughed coldly. He paused for a moment before he exerted force with his feet and charged toward Fan Shouwu. Fan Shouwu wanted to show off his power to his opponent, but the small and skinny man also wanted to show off his power to Fan Shouwu. Fan Shouwu was shocked when he saw that his opponent was charging toward him swiftly. He hurriedly waved his cold light sword and used his ultimate move, the myriad stars technique. The specks of starlight that were commonly seen in Fan Shouwu's hands once again enveloped the enemy. The small and skinny man only laughed coldly when he saw this. His body suddenly shot up and in an instant, he had already leaped into the air. He somersaulted in the air and swept past the specks of starlight that Fan Shouwu had used. He once again let out a long whistle and the dagger in his hand pierced toward Fan Shouwu like lightning. Fan Shouwu turned pale with fright when he saw that his ultimate move had failed. When he saw that his opponent was attacking him in midair, it was already too late for him to withdraw his sword to help. He could only sigh inwardly. My life is over. Hodaki, who was not far from Fan Shouwu, was also shocked. He hurriedly drew his bow and shot an arrow at the small and skinny man. When he shot this arrow, Hodaki also understood that no matter how fast his arrow was, it would definitely not be able to save Fan Shouwu. Among the crowd, the one with the highest martial arts skills was of course Mu Hongi. He could also see that something was wrong. When Fan Shouwu had first appeared, he had guessed that Fan Shouwu would not be a match for his opponent. However, he had never imagined that his opponent would be so powerful. Furthermore, not only was his opponent strong, but his speed was also rather fast. In the blink of an eye, this situation had developed. Mu Hongi knew that no matter how high his martial arts skills were, he would definitely not be able to save Fan Shouwu. However, Mu Hongi also understood that Fan Shouwu must not die because he was the son of the deputy prefectural governor. If Fan Shouwu was killed by the enemy in front of him, how would he explain it to the deputy prefectural governor? At the thought of facing the anger of the deputy prefectural governor, cold sweat trickled down Mu Hongi's forehead. Just as everyone was sweating profusely, the thin man in the air suddenly stiffened and the speed of his attacks slowed down. In that split second, Hodaki's bow and arrow were not to be trifled with. By the time the skinny man reacted, Hodaki's bow and arrow had already arrived. When the skinny man wanted to continue attacking, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his arm that was holding the dagger. He could no longer hold the dagger. His hand loosened, and the dagger flew out of his hand and fell to the ground. Without the dagger, the attack was meaningless. The moment the skinny man landed on the ground, he ignored the pain in his arm and immediately jumped up again, fleeing in the direction he came from. Seeing such a strange scene, everyone on both sides was stunned. Mu Hongi was overjoyed. As long as Fan Shouwu was fine and could still breathe, everything would be fine. Thinking of this, Mu Hongi immediately shouted at Fan Shouwu. Fan Gongzi, come back quickly. You're in too much danger. Fan Shouwu, who had been standing there in a daze, immediately came back to his senses when he heard Mu Hongi's shout. He hurriedly ran back. Fan Shouwu had just taken a step when everyone heard the sound of something breaking through the air. In the blink of an eye, an arrow was shot at the place where Fan Shouwu had been standing. Looking at the shaking tail of the arrow, Mu Hongi was so shocked that cold sweat broke out on his forehead again. The enemy had an archer. Since the enemy had an archer, it was impossible for them to stop after shooting this arrow. In other words, Fan Shouwu was still in danger. As soon as this thought appeared in Mu Hongi's mind, he immediately shouted, "Second brother, quickly stop the enemy's arrow." As soon as Mu Hongi's voice fell, the sound of an arrow breaking through the air was heard again. In fact, even if Mu Hongi had not instructed Hodaki, when the enemy shot the first arrow, Hodaki had already begun to draw his bow and arrow, paying attention to the enemy's archer. When the enemy shot the second arrow, Hodaki also shot an arrow like lightning. Although Hodaki was not very good at close combat, he could definitely be considered an expert in long-range combat. Not long after Hodaki shot the arrow in his hand, everyone heard a clear collision sound. Ding! After the sound, Hodaki's arrow collided with the enemy's arrow and both fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, Fan Shouwu finally escaped successfully and ran into the crowd. Seeing the pale and sweating Fan Shouwu run back into the crowd, Mu Hongyi breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he turned to look at Hodaki and praised him loudly. "Good job, second brother." Hearing Mu Hongyi's praise, Hodaki did not dare to relax. He did not even turn his head and continued to watch the enemy, guarding against the enemy's sudden attack. However, Hodaki's worry was unnecessary. After the enemy shot the 2 arrows, they did not attack again. Instead, they surrounded the thin man and said something. Although the enemy did not move, no one dared to relax their vigilance. At this time, those who dared to relax their vigilance were either fools or idiots. Seeing that the enemy had stopped moving, Zhang Yuntao could not help but lean over to Mu Hongyi and ask, "Big brother, what should we do next?" Mu Hongyi's gaze was fixed on the enemy. After hearing Zhang Yuntao's question, he withdrew his gaze and said slowly, "There's no other way now. We can only wait and see." In any case, Mu Hongyi had to admit that although the martial arts of the thin man just now were a little worse than that of the 5 brothers, it was definitely not worse by a lot. There were 18 people on the enemy's side. If they all had this kind of martial arts, then their side might not be a match for them. Therefore, it would be best if this matter could be settled peacefully. If not, and the other party insisted on putting forward some harsh conditions, then Mu Hongyi, the guard captain of the prefectural governor's mansion, was definitely not someone to be trifled with. In that case, it did not matter if they had a good fight. Mu Hongyi was waiting to see what the other party meant. This was the result of being weak. If all 18 guards of the chief guard manor were present, Mu Hongyi would definitely not wait. He would definitely immediately give the order to eliminate all the enemies. After a long while, the man in armor among the enemy's crowd stepped forward and shouted loudly, "You're attacking us secretly. What kind of men are you? If you have the ability, we won't attack you secretly. Let's fight fair and square." Seeing the other party's attire, Mu Hongyi felt that he should be the leader of the other party. He took a few steps forward and walked out of the crowd as he shouted loudly, "It's you who are not righteous and tried to kill us. That's why we were forced to fight back." Chapter 21. After hearing Mu Hongyi's words, the man wearing chainmail immediately laughed. After a long while, he said, "That's right." After a while, he said, "That's because your martial arts are not good enough. How can you blame us for killing you?" Hearing this, Mu Hongyi sneered and continued to shout, "In that case, let's have a fair fight and see whose martial arts are not good enough." The man in chainmail immediately clapped his hands and said with a big laugh, "In that case, let's not talk nonsense. Tell us, how should we fight?" Mu Hongyi thought for a moment. On his side, only the 5 of them had decent martial arts skills. The rest of them had no combat power at all. Hence, he shouted, "Let's go. Each side will send out 5 people. Then, these 5 people will fight it out. The losing side will leave and the remaining side will stay. What do you think?" The man in chainmail thought for a while and immediately replied, "Okay, in that case, let's do it this way. Each side will send out 5 people. The winning side will stay and the losing side will leave." The man in chainmail was called Green. The people behind him were from the same mercenary group as him. Green was the leader of this mercenary group, the leader of the Fierce Wind mercenary group in Cold Moon City. Green and the others had also received a mission from the Nightmare Eagle. The Raymond family, the #1 family in Cold Moon City, had issued a reward. As long as they could find the trail of the Nightmare Eagle, they would be rewarded with 200 gold coins. 200 gold coins was definitely not a small amount. The key was that this mission did not require them to hunt the nightmare eagle. They only needed to find its trail. Compared to the task of escorting goods, this task was much better. After all, escorting a lot of goods would be very dangerous. As for searching for the whereabouts of the nightmare eagle, Glenn believed that as long as he hid well, he could definitely find the nightmare eagle unscathed and smoothly earn the 200 gold coins. However, if it was found by others, then the 200 gold coins would be wasted. Therefore, Green wanted to stop Mu Hongi and the others from advancing. Since both sides had decided to use martial arts to decide the winner, then it was time to choose people. Mu Hongi did not need to choose. When he said that there would be 5 people, he wanted to rely on the martial arts of his 5 brothers to win this time. Therefore, this time, it was the 5 of them who appeared. On Green's side, there were 2 other vice-captains, Scott and Raoul. Then, he chose the 2 most powerful people from the team. They were Joyce and Field. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, both sides had chosen their people and stood in front of their respective teams. The leaders of both sides would naturally be the last to appear. The first battle: Zhang Yuntao vs. Scott. Zhang Yuntao slowly walked out of the group and stood there, waiting for the other party to appear. The Fierce Wind mercenary group sent their vice leader, Raoul. Zhang Yuntao and Lan Ji were fellow apprentices, and the weapons they used were the same, which was a saber. When Zhang Yuntao saw that his opponent had stepped forward, he did not say anything. He just slowly pulled out his saber. Seeing that his opponent had already drawn his weapon, Raoul also drew his own weapon from behind him. Mace. The 2 of them weren't talkative people. Seeing that their opponents had already drawn their weapons, they didn't waste any more word. They directly brandished the weapons in their hands and rushed towards their opponent. Seeing that they had already rushed in front of him, Zhang Yuntao's hand moved and the steel saber in his hand slashed towards his opponent like lightning. Naturally, Raoul was not willing to be outdone. He also waved the mace in his hand and went up from bottom to top. In the blink of an eye, the weapons of the 2 men had collided with each other, immediately making a sound of metal clashing. After the sound, both of them were shaken by the force of the collision and took a step back. Zhang Yuntao looked at his opponent with some surprise. He didn't expect his opponent's strength to be similar to his. Zhang Yuntao's unique skill, Stonebreaker, relied on strength to survive. Even if he didn't use his unique skill, his strength was not something that ordinary people could withstand. Raoul was even more surprised. He was already very strong, and with the addition of the heavy weapon he used, his strength was even greater. He didn't expect that his opponent would only take a step back like him. Seeing that his opponent could withstand his attack, Zhang Yuntao's competitive spirit was immediately aroused. He clenched the steel saber in his hand, made a low growl, and rushed towards his opponent. Raoul was also extremely conceited in terms of strength. Seeing that his opponent's strength was actually faintly on his body, how could he be convinced? Seeing Zhang Yuntao rush up again, he immediately roared and waved his mace to meet his opponent. This time, the 2 men still used the same tactics as before. Zhang Yuntao slashed at his opponent's head, and Raoul raised his mace to meet it. This time, both of them used 100% of their strength. They were both prepared to determine the victor in this attack. In the blink of an eye, the 2 men's weapons collided with each other again. The sound of metal clashing was suddenly loud. After the sound, both of them took 3 steps back at the same time before they could stabilize their bodies. After standing firm, Zhang Yuntao felt that his hand holding the saber was trembling slightly. He was even more surprised. He knew that he would never win if he didn't use his unique skill today. After the 2 men looked at each other silently for a moment, Zhang Yuntao suddenly laughed. I didn't expect you to be so strong. It seems that I can only use my unique skill to deal with you. Hearing this, Raoul also laughed. I have the same idea. It's too troublesome to continue fighting like this. Let's decide the winner with one move. Zhang Yuntao nodded, raised the steel saber in his hand, and said slowly, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's start." As he spoke, Zhang Yuntao's figure suddenly burst out, leaping into the air like lightning. At the same time, the steel saber in his hand shone brightly. Then, Zhang Yuntao let out a violent roar. Rock Breaker. Zhang Yuntao's Rock Breaker was definitely quite powerful. It was said that if this move was practiced to a certain level, it could really split a huge rock. At the same time, Raoul saw that Zhang Yuntao had already launched an attack. His eyes narrowed slightly, and then he let out a low growl. Critical hit. Zhang Yuntao, who was in midair, had a huge saber shadow, and with an indomitable posture, he slashed towards Raoul. At this time, Raoul, who was on the ground, also danced with his mace, and met the saber shadow in the sky. Boom! The two men's weapons collided again, and suddenly there was an earth-shattering sound. After the sound, Raoul retreated more than a dozen steps in a row before he could stabilize his body. A red light flashed on his face, and he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. On the other hand, Zhang Yuntao's figure flew back a few meters before he slowly fell from the air. However, he also felt a surge of blood in his stomach, but he endured it. Chapter 22. In the first battle, even if Green didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that his side had lost. Green saw Raoul coming back and asked with concern, "Raoul, are you okay?" Raoul shook his head. "I'm fine. I just need to rest." Hearing Raoul say that he was fine, Green was relieved. He turned to look at his brothers behind him, thought for a moment, and then said to Field, "Field, you fight the second battle. Let's see what other powerful masters they have." Field was a burly man who was nearly 2 meters tall. His body was covered in bronze muscles. No one dared to doubt his strength when they saw him. Field responded and strode forward. Mu Hongyi saw that the other side did not have a weapon, so he said to Shin Feisher behind him, "Old Five, the other side seems to be a boxing master. You should fight this round." Shin Feisher nodded. In terms of close combat, he was still very confident. Shin Feisher was only about 1.7 meters tall. Standing in front of Field, he was a lot shorter. However, Shin Feisher was not afraid because he understood that close combat not only required strength, but also flexibility. The other side's body was so big, in terms of flexibility, he should not be very strong. Thinking of this, Shin Feisher's confidence suddenly increased. His heart-destroying fist was not a joke. Field saw that his opponent was coming. He slowly took out a pair of boxing gloves and put them on his hands, ready to fight. Shin Feisher saw that his opponent had put on boxing gloves and was suddenly surprised. The boxing gloves had a sharp blade, which could be used to increase one's attack power. In the face of an enemy with boxing gloves, Shin Feisher was just surprised, but not afraid because he was still very confident in his own kung fu. The two men came to the arena. After a short time of looking at each other, they immediately launched an attack at the same time. When the two sides attacked, it could be seen that Shin Feisher's steps were vigorous, and his body was flexible. He had already rushed up. On the other hand, Field was rampaging, relying on his huge body, like an armored car, towards Shin Feisher. As soon as the two men approached, Field had already waved his left fist toward Shin Feisher. Shin Feisher smiled coldly. His body spun and he turned to Field's side. Then, he raised his fist and punched toward Field's side. Just this one attack was enough to determine the winner. Although Field's attack was ferocious, facing the extremely agile Shin Feisher, it was a bit too passive. When Field saw that the opponent was attacking him from the side, he hurriedly swung his fist, wanting to perish together with the opponent. Field had already thought it through very clearly. The other party's arms and legs were small, so even if he punched him, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, Field believed that as long as he punched the other party, he would definitely make the other party suffer. Both sides had good ideas and acted according to their own ideas. Shin Feisher's fist technique was as fast as lightning. In just a breath, his fist hit Field. Field, who was hit by Shin Feisher, suddenly felt pain in his stomach. He couldn't help but scream in pain. Subconsciously, he wanted to retreat. However, Shin Feisher's attack was definitely not limited to this punch. Taking advantage of Field's unbearable pain, Shin Feisher's second punch was already thrown out. It was also at this time that Field's big fist also flew in front of Shin Feisher. Shin Feisher saw this fierce punch, but he didn't panic. He just bent his body slightly and dodged Field's attack. His second punch hit the other party's side. Field, who was hit by Shin Feisher's 2 punches in a row, could no longer stabilize his body. He involuntarily took 2 steps back, and his face turned into the color of a pig's liver. Seeing that Shin Feisher had won, Mu Hongyi couldn't help but smile and nod. This old fifth, although a bit unreliable, is still a bit useful at critical times. It was also at this time that a hawk's cry suddenly came from the sky. After everyone heard this hawk's cry, they were all shocked. No one cared about this battle anymore. This was because the hawk's cry, although it was indeed the sound of a hawk, was high-pitched and powerful, sharp and ear-piercing. It made people's hearts tremble uncontrollably. Everyone hurriedly looked in the direction of the sound and saw that in the distant sky, there was a small black dot moving here. After everyone saw this small black dot, they were even more shocked, because this black dot was too far away, but the cry it made was as loud as if it was in everyone's ears. Nightmare Hawk. Seeing this black dot in the sky, a name appeared in everyone's mind at the same time. Although they didn't see the appearance of the Nightmare Hawk, no one doubted that this was the Nightmare Hawk. The Nightmare Hawk in the distance flew very fast. In the blink of an eye, it became a lot bigger in everyone's line of sight. Looking at the Nightmare Hawk that was getting closer and closer, Mu Hongyi suddenly shouted, "Hide in the woods, don't let the Nightmare Hawk find you." After hearing Mu Hongyi's words, everyone came back to their senses. They hurriedly retracted their gazes and followed Mu Hongyi into the woods to hide. On the opposite side, Green naturally wouldn't let the Nightmare Hawk find his traces, because their mission was only to find the Nightmare Hawk, not to kill it. After everyone hid, the sound of wings flapping in the air came from the sky. At the same time, the Nightmare Hawk in the sky let out another eagle cry. As the Nightmare Eagle was already very close to the crowd, its cry caused everyone's ears to buzz. Those who were weaker had already used their hands to cover their ears. They didn't dare to listen any further, afraid that the sharp cry would break their eardrums. Zhang Meng looked at the big guy in the sky and couldn't help but ask Fan Shouwu beside him, "Fan Gongzi, is this the Nightmare Hawk?" At this time, Fan Shouwu was so nervous facing the Nightmare Hawk in the sky that his face was flushed red. Even his hands were trembling slightly. After hearing Zhang Meng's question, he nodded. "I haven't seen the Nightmare Hawk before, but looking at this guy's appearance, it should be the legendary Nightmare Hawk." Hearing this, Zhang Meng nodded. He looked around and saw that everyone was hiding in the grass, not daring to breathe loudly. They didn't look like they were going to catch the Nightmare Hawk. He felt a little strange and hurriedly asked Fan Shouwu again, "Fan Gongzi, the Nightmare Hawk is above us now. Why aren't we attacking? If it runs away, we won't be able to catch up." Hearing this, Fan Shouwu looked at Zhang Meng with some confusion. After a while, he suddenly asked, "The Fierce Brothers haven't hunted before?" Zhang Meng shook his head. When had he ever hunted? Although he had lived 2 lives, he didn't have any experience in this area. Chapter 23. Fan Shouwu shook his head when he heard Zhang Meng say that he did not have any hunting experience. We are definitely not a match for a powerful creature like the nightmare eagle if we rely on martial arts alone. Fan Shouwu glanced at Mu Hongyi again. Seeing that he was not looking at them, he lowered his voice and continued. Even Captain Mu Hongyi wasn't a match for the nightmare eagle. If we want to capture the nightmare eagle, we have to find where it lives. Then, we have to find a way to make it eat the poison that we have prepared. Only then will it be time for the hunt. Zhang Meng was even more puzzled and could not help but ask. Can't we just fight it directly? Fan Shouwu shook his head. It's possible to succeed, but the losses would be too great. Furthermore, the chances of success are not high. Zhang Meng raised his head to look at the nightmare eagle circling in the sky and said gloomily. So hunting is so troublesome. Fan Shouwu and Zhang Qiuming had rushed to hunt not because of their high martial arts, but because they had obtained a type of poison. Legend had it that this poison could even poison a giant dragon to death. Fan Shouwu and the others' so-called hunt was actually to find a way to make the nightmare eagle eat the poison. Otherwise, even if Fan Shouwu was an idiot, he would not dare to hunt the nightmare eagle with martial arts alone. Not only did Fan Shouwu not dare, even Captain Mu Hongyi did not dare. No matter how powerful the five of them were, they would not dare to fight the nightmare eagle head-on. After understanding this point, Zhang Meng, who was ready to fight at any time, lay on the grass dejectedly. He looked at the gaps between the leaves and saw the nightmare eagle hovering above everyone's heads. After looking for a while, Mu Hongyi's expression became uglier and uglier. He suddenly thought that eagles had very good eyesight. Could it be that the nightmare eagle had discovered them? Thinking of this, Mu Hongyi could not help but feel a little nervous. If the nightmare eagle had really discovered their tracks, then this hunting operation would not go smoothly. They might even have to fight the nightmare eagle head-on. Although Mu Hongyi was very proud of his martial arts, he was not confident that he could defeat nightmare eagle in a head-on fight. Mu Hongyi was not the only one who was extremely nervous. Even Grim, who was not far away, was looking at the nightmare eagle that was constantly circling in the air with an ashen face. Their mission was to find traces of the nightmare eagle, and it was for this reason that Grim had accepted this mission. If this mission was to kill a nightmare eagle, Green would never accept this mission because it was too dangerous. Even if he had never seen a nightmare eagle, he had heard of its name. Grim did not believe that the 18 of them could kill the nightmare eagle. Scott, the vice-captain of the Gale Mercenary Corps, quietly came to Grim's side and asked in a low voice, "Leader, what should we do? From the looks of it, the nightmare eagle has already discovered our track." Hearing this, Grim nodded. Even without Scott's reminder, he had also noticed this problem. If the nightmare eagle hadn't discovered their tracks, why hadn't it flown away yet? Why was it hovering above their heads? Seeing that the captain did not speak, Scott continued. "Captain, we can't go on like this. Why don't we retreat and hide for now?" Grim looked at the nightmare eagle in the sky and sighed helplessly. "I want to retreat too, but I'm afraid that the nightmare eagle won't let us go." Scott heard this and was stunned for a moment before he asked tentatively, "Captain, are you saying that the nightmare eagle won't let us go?" Grim nodded. As the captain of the Gale Mercenary Corps, he naturally knew more than Scott. They were here to hunt the nightmare eagle, but the nightmare eagle was also here to hunt them. It was also at this moment that the nightmare eagle above their heads suddenly let out a loud eagle cry. In the next moment, a flame was spat out from the nightmare eagle's mouth and landed on the tree behind them. The fire suddenly ignited and grew bigger and bigger. Grim looked at the fire behind them and shouted with an ugly expression, "Everyone retreat, stay away from the fire." Through the direction of the fire in the forest, Grim found that the nightmare eagle had sealed off their escape route. It would be difficult to retreat. Not only that, the nightmare eagle in the sky continued to spit out fire in the air. After a while, they were shocked to find that they had been surrounded by the nightmare eagle. Looking at the fire in the distance, Mu Hongyi's face was pale as he cursed angrily. This beast is too cunning. It's afraid that we'll run away, so it surrounded us with fire. Zhang Meng, who was lying on the ground, looked at the nightmare eagle circling in the sky. He found that the eyes of the nightmare eagle were flashing with a cold, murderous intent. He could not help but be a little surprised. Could it be that this beast already had intelligence? Looking at the fire burning around them, everyone was panicking. Ho Daki hurried to Mu Hongyi's side and asked anxiously, "Big brother, what should we do?" Looking at the raging fire around them, Mu Hongyi smiled bitterly and shook his head. What could he do? There was fire all around them. Even if they wanted to run, there was nowhere to run. Fan Shouwu, who was beside Zhang Meng, was sweating profusely. He kept circling Zhang Meng, but there was nothing he could do. He could only mumble to himself, "What should we do? What should we do?" Looking at Fan Shouwu's panicked look, and hearing the burning sounds around them, Zhang Meng sat up hurriedly and checked the situation around them. He did not know if he did not look, but when he did, he was shocked. Zhang Yiming only took one look and was immediately enraged. It would be a pity if such a big forest was burned down by this fire. As a bird of the forest, this nightmare eagle did not have any thoughts of caring for the environment. This was too infuriating. Thinking about how many years it would take for a tree to grow, Zhang Meng was even angrier. At this moment, Chief Zhang was furious. The consequences of angering Chief Zhang were not something that ordinary people could bear. Although this nightmare eagle looked strong, in Chief Zhang's eyes, it was not even a fart. Zhang Meng picked up a big rock from the ground. Looking at the nightmare eagle in the sky, he threw it out. In the burning forest, everyone was panicking. At this moment, they suddenly heard the cry of the nightmare eagle in the sky. They felt a little strange, because although this cry was loud and powerful, it sounded like a scream. Not only that, even the way the nightmare eagle was circling in the sky was a little strange. Chapter 24. The way the nightmare eagle was flying was indeed a little strange. Logically speaking, the speed at which it flapped its wings should be the same. However, things were a little different now. One of the nightmare eagle's wings was flapping fast while the other was flapping slowly. This had resulted in a consequence. The nightmare eagle's body tilted as it kept turning in the sky as if it was struggling. Everyone stared at this scene in shock as they watched the nightmare eagle's comical performance in the sky. After a while, the nightmare eagle steadied its body and let out a sorrowful cry. It flapped its wings and flew unsteadily back the way it had come. The fire was still burning and the burning trees were crackling. Even though everyone was still surrounded by the fire, they were much calmer without the threat of the nightmare eagle. Mu Hongyi saw that the nightmare eagle had flown away. Even though he did not understand why it had left, this was a good thing and there was no need to pursue the matter. However, they were now surrounded by the fire, and everyone was still in danger. Mu Hongyi thought for a moment and immediately jumped up onto a tree to observe the fire in the distance. After observing for a while, he shook his head sadly. The fire around them was getting bigger and bigger. Furthermore, it was getting closer and closer to them. Based on the speed at which it was burning, it would not take long for the fire to surround them all. Even though Mu Hongyi was highly skilled in martial arts, that did not mean that he was not afraid of fire. He was equally helpless in the face of the raging fire. When they saw Mu Hongyi jump down from the tree, everyone hurriedly surrounded him and asked about the situation. Mu Hongyi sighed and said helplessly, "The fire is too big. I'm afraid that it'll be very difficult for us to escape." Everyone looked at Mu Hongyi's ashen face and listened to his helpless words. Their hearts sank and they knew that this time, they were afraid that they would not be able to escape. Fan Shouwu looked at the fire next to him. When he thought of being buried in this fire, his face turned pale and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Just then, Zhang Meng slowly walked to his side and asked softly, Fan Gongzi, how are you going to get out? Fan Shouwu shook his head and said sadly, There's nothing we can do now. The fire is so big that even if we want to rush out, it's impossible. At this point, Fan Shouwu turned to look at Zhang Meng and sighed before continuing. The fierce brothers, I didn't expect you to end up like this after coming with us. I'm really sorry. Hearing this, Zhang Meng shook his head and said with a smile, Fan Gongzi, I can save you all, but you know the situation in our stronghold. We don't have enough food to eat. So, if I save you all, I'll have to pay a fee in exchange for food for the people in the stronghold. Are you willing to do that? When Fan Shouwu heard this, he looked at Zhang Meng with some surprise. After a while, he asked tentatively, The fierce brothers, do you have a way to get out? Zhang Meng nodded. I have an idea. When Fan Shouwu heard this, he was immediately overjoyed and said hurriedly, The fierce brothers, then what are we waiting for? Hurry up and bring us out. Zhang Meng shook his head. Fan Gongzi, I've said before that there'll be a fee. When Fan Shouwu heard this, he immediately grabbed Zhang Meng's arm and urged him. A fee? No problem, then let's go quickly. When Zhang Meng saw Fan Shouwu's anxious appearance, he thought for a while and said, Fan Gongzi, 50 gold coins per person isn't much. When Fan Shouwu heard this, he didn't say anything and directly took out a silver note and handed it to Zhang Meng. Zhang Meng took the banknotes and glanced at them. Then, he nodded and put the banknotes away. This was a silver note worth 2,000 gold coins. Including Zhang Meng, there were a total of 14 people here. This silver note was enough. When Fan Shouwu saw Zhang Meng put away the silver note, he urged again. The fierce brothers, let's hurry up and leave. After Zhang Meng put away the silver note, he nodded and said with a smile, No problem. Fan Gongzi, call everyone here. I'll send you all out. Although Fan Shouwu didn't understand how Zhang Meng was going to lead everyone out of this fire, at this moment, Zhang Meng was like a life-saving straw and their only chance of survival. Fan Shouwu's guards and Zhang Qiuming were easy to talk to. As long as Fan Shouwu waved his hand, they would all gather. Only Mu Hongyi and the other 4 brothers were not easy to talk to. They needed Fan Shouwu to personally talk to them about this matter. After Mu Hongyi heard Fan Shouwu's words, he turned his head and looked at Zhang Meng in the distance with some doubts. Just as Mu Hongyi was hesitating whether to go over, Shen Feisher suddenly said loudly from the side, Big brother, don't listen to that kid's nonsense. The fire here is so big. How can he lead us out? He must be trying to cheat us of our money. Big brother, don't be fooled. Hearing Shen Feisher's words, Mu Hongyi was even more confused. Just now, when Mu Hongyi jumped onto the tree, he had already seen the fire clearly and felt that it was hopeless to escape. The burning area was 50 to 60 meters wide. No matter how high Mu Hongyi's martial arts were, he couldn't jump 50 to 60 meters in one jump. This meant that no matter how he jumped, he would fall into the sea of fire in the end. Then, what method did this kid have? Looking at Shen Feisher, Mu Hongyi thought for a moment and said, Fan Gongzi, you guys go with him first. I'll take a look first. When Fan Shouwu heard this, he knew that Mu Hongyi didn't believe that Zhang Meng could lead them out, so he didn't force him. To be honest, even Fan Shouwu didn't dare to believe that Zhang Meng could lead them out. However, this was their last chance. No matter what, they had to seize it. Even if Zhang Meng tricked them, so what? They would just lose some gold coins. If they were buried in the sea of fire, then the banknotes would also be burned. What use would that be? It was better to believe in Zhang Meng this time and gamble on their luck. When Zhang Meng saw that Fan Shouwu had returned alone, he sneered in his heart. Really, it's not a good thing to be in a hurry. After a while, if they still want to leave, the price will increase. Fan Shouwu quickly walked to Zhang Meng's side and said in a low voice, Brother Meng, please bring us away first. Guard Captain Mu, please wait for a while before leaving. Since he understood their intentions, Zhang Meng didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, "Who's going first?" When Fan Shouwu heard this, he was a little surprised and asked doubtfully, "The Fierce Brothers, aren't we going together?" Zhang Meng shook his head. "There are so many of you. I can only send you out one by one." When Fan Shouwu heard this, he was even more confused and couldn't help but ask again, "The Fierce Brothers, how are you going to take us out?" Zhang Meng smiled and suddenly reached out to pick up a stone from the ground. He threw it into the fire and then clapped his hands and said with a smile, Chapter 25. Seeing that Fan Shouwu didn't understand how he was going to bring them out, he gave a demonstration and said with a smile, "Just like that, I'll throw you over one by one." Seeing the stone fall into the fire, Fan Shouwu was dumbfounded. Could it be that this guy wanted to throw all of them over one by one? How could this be? What if they didn't have enough strength and fell into the fire? Fan Shouwu couldn't help but shiver at the thought of falling into the sea of fire halfway. He asked hesitantly, "The Fierce Brothers, is this really okay?" Zhang Meng smiled and patted Fan Shouwu's shoulder as he spoke with a serious expression. "Fan Gongzi, don't worry. If I can't throw them over, just refund the money." Refund the money? Fan Shouwu was speechless when he heard this. If Zhang Meng didn't throw them over, they would only fall into the sea of fire. Who would refund the money then? At this moment, old Luo suddenly strode over and whispered into Fan Shouwu's ear, "Young master, there's no other way now. Why don't I give it a try first? If it's safe, you can go over." Fan Shouwu looked at old Luo gratefully. Old Luo was an elder of the Fan family. He was loyal to the Fan family and wouldn't hesitate to go through fire and water. "Alright then, I'll let you try first. If you fail, I'll take care of your family for you. You can go without worry." Old Luo looked at Fan Shouwu speechlessly and muttered in his heart. Young master's words were too depressing. Why did it sound like he was sending himself to his death this time? To be honest, old Luo wasn't confident in his heart. However, he remembered that Zhang Meng was able to knock down the bear of the earth with a tree. He must be strong. Seeing Zhang Meng's confident look, old Luo felt that there was a chance of success. Old Luo thought as he walked to Zhang Meng's side and said with a smile, "The Fierce Brothers, no, Brother Meng, my life depends on you this time. You have to put in more effort, don't let me fall into the sea of fire halfway." Zhang Meng smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, it's not a problem to throw you over. The key is that you have to be careful when you descend after crossing the fire." After saying that, Zhang Meng didn't say anything else. He reached out and grabbed old Luo. With a slight tug, he threw old Luo into the air. Old Luo was like a cannonball, flying over the fire like lightning. When Zhang Qiuming saw old Luo being thrown away, he quickly jumped up onto a tall tree and looked in the direction old Luo was flying. Everyone was just a bystander. Although they were also very nervous, compared to the person involved, it was simply too different. Among these people, the most nervous was of course old Luo. The moment he was thrown out by Zhang Meng, old Luo felt a hot wind blowing against his face. Not only that, the closer he got to the fire, the stronger the hot wind became. When he was above the fire, old Luo was already drenched in sweat. Looking at the raging fire below, old Luo's heart seemed to be in his throat as he looked down nervously. In the next moment, as he went deeper into the fire, old Luo went into the black smoke rising from the fire. This time, old Luo didn't feel good. He was caught off guard and inhaled a few mouthfuls of smoke, causing him to cough non-stop. Subconsciously, old Luo hurriedly held his breath and closed his eyes, not daring to breathe in the smoke again. After a while, old Luo suddenly felt the heat on his body dissipate a lot. He opened his eyes and saw that he had crossed the fire. Looking at the forest below that wasn't on fire, old Luo was ecstatic. He knew that he had made the right bet. That kid really threw him out of the fire. At this time, Zhang Qiuming had already vaguely seen old Luo through the thick black smoke and landed in a safe area. He was overjoyed and knew that everyone was saved this time. Seeing Zhang Qiuming jump down from the tree with a face full of joy, Fan Shouwu was so happy that he almost jumped up. If old Luo didn't fly over the fire, Zhang Qiuming definitely wouldn't have this kind of expression. Thinking of this, Fan Shouwu immediately looked up to the sky and laughed. Heaven never bars one's way. Seeing Fan Shouwu looking up to the sky and laughing, Mu Hongyi's heart moved and a trace of joy appeared on his face. Could it be that the boy could really throw people out of the fire? Seeing that there was a chance to escape, Mu Hongyi was very happy. However, Xin Feisher was a little unhappy. Although he didn't have any grudges with Zhang Meng, he had picked on Zhang Meng's faults last night, and then he had been plotted against. He had to kneel down and kowtow to Zhang Meng, slapping Zhang Meng's face. In Xin Feisher's view, the two sides were almost irreconcilable. To be honest, Xin Feisher had long wanted to find a chance to get back his face. However, he didn't know that not only did he not get back his face, he might even have to go and beg that kid. Since this method was feasible, Fan Shouwu and others immediately signed up. In the end, like buying things, everyone lined up and waited for Zhang Meng to throw them one by one. Zhang Meng was not polite. At first, he grabbed one person with 2 hands and threw them. Later, he picked up one person in each hand and threw them towards the fire. The guards were so scared that they screamed. Even when they were in the air, they screamed non-stop. Fan Shouwu was the second to be thrown over. After he stood there, he began to look at the people who were thrown over next. It didn't take long before Fan Shouwu, Zhang Qiuming and the guards they led gathered on the side of the fire. Seeing that everyone was unscathed, Fan Shouwu felt like crying tears of joy. They finally escaped. No, there were still 5 people, including Mu Hongyi, who hadn't come over yet. However, Fan Shouwu wasn't worried. He believed that it wouldn't be long before Mu Hongyi and the other 4 people were thrown over by Zhang Meng. Fan Shouwu's guess was right. When Mu Hongyi saw that there was no one in front of Zhang Meng, he walked forward with a smile, clasped his hands and said with a smile, "Little brother, I'll have to trouble you to send us over too." Zhang Meng nodded. "Sure, but I'll charge you." Mu Hongyi was startled when he heard this. He didn't see Fan Shouwu give Zhang Meng banknotes and thought it was free. However, it didn't matter. Wasn't it just a fee? This was what he should do. After all, he was saving his life. Thinking of this, Mu Hongyi asked with a smile, "How much does little brother need?" Zhang Meng thought for a moment and said, "I'm saving your life. I'm saving your lives so you can pay me however much you think your lives are worth." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.